I was 52 years old the morning my career died in a conference room that smelled like stale coffee and broken promises. 25 years of handshakes and sales quotas, of airport lounges and hotel rooms that all looked the same, of missing birthdays and baseball games because I was always chasing the next commission check. All of it ended in 11 minutes with a woman from Human Resources I'd never met reading from a script about corporate restructuring and market forces beyond anyone's control. They called it early retirement. I called it what it was. I was being thrown away. My name is Daniel Morrison, and if you'd asked me 6 months before that morning what defined me, I would have said Regional Sales Director for PharmaCorp, responsible for the Midwest territory, consistently in the top 10% of performers nationwide. I would have told you about the awards, the recognition, the respect I'd earned climbing from entry-level sales rep to management. I would have rattled off numbers and metrics and quarterly growth percentages like they meant something, like they added up to a life worth living. I would have been lying to both of us. The truth is, I'd been empty for years. I just hadn't had the courage to admit it until the day they took away the title, and the business cards, in the company car, and I was left standing in a parking lot in St. Louis holding a cardboard box with a desk plant I'd never watered and a coffee mug that said World's Best Dad, a gift from my daughter Emma, when she was 7 years old. She was 26 now. We hadn't spoken in 3 years. The severance package they gave me was generous by corporate standards. 6 months of salary, continuation of health benefits, and a handshake from my former boss who couldn't look me in the eye. I drove home to my empty 3-bedroom house in Clayton, the upscale suburb I'd bought to prove I'd made something of myself. And I sat in my driveway for 20 minutes before I could make myself go inside. The house was silent. It had been silent since my wife Linda moved out 4 years earlier, taking most of the furniture and all of the warmth with her. The divorce wasn't ugly. It was worse than that. It was inevitable. She'd stopped fighting for us somewhere around year 15 when she finally accepted that I was married to my job and she was just the woman who lived in my house when I happened to be home. I'd heard through Emma that Linda had remarried last year, moved to San Diego with a man who actually came home for dinner. I was happy for her, or at least I told myself I was. Mostly I felt nothing, just the dull ache of knowing I'd thrown away something precious because I'd been too busy chasing things that didn't matter. I poured myself a scotch at 2 in the afternoon, then another. By sunset, I was drunk enough to scroll through my phone contacts, looking at names of people I used to call friends. Most of them were colleagues, former colleagues now. I wondered how many would return my calls. I put the phone down without finding out. That night, I sat alone in my living room, in the one piece of furniture Linda had left behind, an oversized leather recliner that faced a television I rarely watched. The house creaked and settled around me. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear a neighbor's dog barking. I thought about my daughter Emma, about my son Marcus, who'd moved to Seattle and changed his phone number. I thought about all the times I'd chosen a client dinner over a school play, a business trip over a family vacation, a conference call over a conversation with my wife. I thought about my father, Frank Morrison, who I hadn't visited in 6 years. The drink in my hand tasted like regret. I want to tell you that I had some moment of clarity that night, some revelation that set me on a path to redemption. That's not how it happened, Hin. What happened is I finished the bottle, passed out in the chair, and woke up at 4 in the morning with a headache that felt like my skull was trying to split open. I stumbled to the bathroom, threw up, and made a decision that seemed perfectly reasonable in that state. I was going to drive. I don't remember getting in the car. I don't remember most of the next 2 hours. What I remember is flashing lights in my rearview mirror, the sick dropping feeling in my stomach when I realized I was weaving between lanes, and a police officer's flashlight in my face asking me if I knew why he'd pulled me over. The DUI citation came with a court date, a mandatory alcohol education class, and a fine I couldn't afford now that I was unemployed. It also came with something unexpected. Shame. Real burning shame that felt like acid in my throat. I called my mother at 7 in the morning where I'd been released and driven home by a patrol officer who lectured me about responsibility the entire way. Judith Morrison answered on the second ring. She always answered on the second ring, like she'd been waiting by the phone for years, hoping one of her children would call. "Mom," I said, "I need help." There was a pause. Then her voice, soft and worn like an old sweater. "What kind of help, Danny?" Nobody had called me Danny in 30 years. Hearing it now from the woman who'd raised me in a three-room apartment above a laundromat while my father worked double shifts at the garage, it broke something loose in my chest. I got a DUI last night, I said. I lost my job yesterday. I don't know what I'm doing anymore. Another pause. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. It was firmer. Where are you right now? Home. Are you safe? I think so. Daniel, she said, and now it was my full name, the one she used when I was in trouble as a kid. You need to come home, your real home. Your father needs you. The words hit me like cold water. Dad? What's wrong with Dad? He had a stroke 2 months ago, she said quietly. I didn't call you because I knew you were busy with work. But he's not doing well, Danny. The doctors say he's stable, but he can't live alone anymore. We had to move him to Spring Meadow Assisted Living. He asks about you sometimes. The guilt that crashed over me in that moment was worse than any hangover. 2 months. My father had been in a nursing home for 2 months, and I hadn't known because I'd been too wrapped up in my own life to check in with my parents. Too busy selling pharmaceuticals to strangers to care about the man who'd raised me. I'll come, I said. Today, I'll drive down today. My mother's voice softened. Be careful on the road, Danny. And Daniel, maybe it's time you and your father had a real conversation. You've been running from him for 30 years. I don't know why, but I think it's time to stop. She hung up before I could respond. I sat there holding the phone, feeling the weight of her words settle over me like a blanket I couldn't shake off. Running from him for 30 years. She wasn't wrong. Spring Meadow Assisted Living was 2 hours south of St. Louis, in a small town called Hannibal, that most people only knew because Mark Twain had grown up there. I'd grown up there too, though I'd spent most of my adult life pretending I hadn't. I'd rewritten my own history, telling colleagues I was from St. Louis, letting them assume I'd come from money and private schools, when the truth was I'd come from a father who came home every night with grease under his fingernails and a mother who stretched hamburger meat with oatmeal to make it feed 4 people. I'd been ashamed of where I came from. That shame had driven me to succeed, to climb, to become someone different than the mechanic's son from Hannibal, Missouri. Now I was driving back to face the man I'd spent 3 decades trying not to become. The nursing home was nicer than I expected. Clean hallways, artwork on the walls, staff members who smiled and made eye contact. It still smelled like every nursing home I'd ever been in. Disinfectant and old age and the particular sadness of people waiting to die. My mother met me in the lobby. Judith Morrison was 75 years old, her hair completely white now, her shoulders more stooped than I remembered. But her eyes were the same, sharp and kind, and carrying a weight of disappointment that she'd never once voiced, but that I'd felt my entire life. She hugged me. I'm glad you came, Danny. How is he? She pulled back and looked at me carefully, studying my face the way she used to when I was young. And she was trying to decide if I was telling her the truth. He's weak. The stroke affected his right side. He can't walk without a walker, and his speech is slurred. But his mind is still sharp. Too sharp, maybe. He knows what he's lost. She led me down a hallway decorated with watercolor paintings of landscapes that were probably supposed to be soothing, but just made me feel worse. We stopped at room 117. My mother put her hand on my arm. Be patient with him, she said. He's not the man you remember. And Danny, don't run away this time. Before I could ask what she meant, she opened the door. The man in the bed looked nothing like the father I remembered. Frank Morrison had been 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered, strong enough to lift an engine block by himself. The man in the bed was shrunken, his skin gray, his right arm lying useless on top of the blanket. But his eyes were the same, dark brown, intense, watching me with an expression I couldn't read. Hey, Dad, I said, and my voice came out rougher than I intended. His mouth moved, working to form words. It took several seconds. Daniel, you came. The words were thick, slurred, but understandable. I moved closer to the bed, suddenly unsure what to do with my hands. Yeah, Mom called. I'm sorry I didn't come sooner. I didn't know. My mother had moved to the window, giving us space. My father's eyes never left my face. He was studying me the way he used to when I was young, before things went wrong between us, before I decided he wasn't good enough to be part of the life I was building. Busy, he managed to say, always busy. It wasn't an accusation, just a statement of fact, but it cut deeper than anger would have. I sat down in the chair next to his bed. The leather creaked. Yeah, I've been busy, but that's over now. I lost my job yesterday. Something flickered in his eyes. Might have been sympathy, might have been satisfaction. I couldn't tell. Good, he said. I blinked. Good? His mouth worked again, fighting for the words. Now you can stop running. There was a long silence. Outside the window, I could hear birds singing. The sound felt wrong, too cheerful for this moment. My mother moved toward the door. I'll give you some time, she said softly. Danny, there's something your father wants to give you. It's in the drawer of the nightstand. She left before I could respond. I looked at my father. He moved his left hand, the one that still worked, pointing at the small table next to the bed. I opened the drawer. Inside was an envelope, yellowed with age, addressed in handwriting I didn't recognize. I pulled it out and turned it over. It wasn't sealed. Open it, my father said. I did. Inside was a single piece of paper with an address written in the same careful handwriting. Walter Cunningham, Meadowbrook Farm, Hannibal, Missouri. Below it, a phone number. Who's Walter Cunningham, I asked. My father's face did something complicated. Best friend, long time ago. Need to see him, you need to see him. I don't understand. Owe him, my father struggled to say. Owe him apology. 40 years, too long. Need you to go, need you to tell him, sorry. Dad, I can't just show up at some stranger's house and… Not stranger, my father interrupted. The words coming faster now, fueled by something that looked like desperation. Brother was my brother. Before things went wrong, need to make it right, before I die. The last two words hung in the air between us. Before I die. Said so casually, like he was talking about the weather. But his eyes were locked on mine, and I saw something in them I'd never seen before. Fear. My father was afraid. You're not dying, I said, but it sounded weak even to my own ears. All dying, he said. Question is what we do with time left. What we fix. What we leave broken. He reached out with his left hand, grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. Promise me. Go see Walt. Give him message. Tell him Frank Morrison is sorry. Tell him I was wrong. Tell him I should have said it 40 years ago. The intensity in his grip, in his voice, left me no room to refuse. Okay, I said. I'll go. I'll tell him. My father's hand relaxed. He closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were wet. Thank you, son. It was the first time he'd called me son in 30 years. I stayed for another hour sitting in that chair while my father drifted in and out of sleep. My mother came back with coffee and sat with us, not saying much, just being present in the way she'd always been present, quietly holding our broken family together with a strength none of us deserved. When I finally stood to leave, my father opened his eyes one more time. Daniel, he said, Walt has something for you. Something you need. Don't know what, but he'll know when he sees you. That doesn't make any sense, Dad. His mouth curved into something that might have been a smile. Nothing makes sense, then it does. Go. I drove away from Spring Meadow feeling like I'd stepped into someone else's life. 24 hours ago, I'd been a regional sales director with a clear path forward, or at least the illusion of one. Now I was unemployed, facing a DUI charge, and on my way to visit a man I'd never met to deliver an apology for a wrong I didn't understand. The address led me out of Hannibal proper, into farm country where the houses grew farther apart and the land opened up into fields that stretched to the horizon. I'd grown up around this landscape, but I'd stopped seeing it years ago, trained myself not to notice the beauty in it, because noticing would mean admitting something I'd spent my adult life denying. That I'd come from this, that this was in my blood. Meadowbrook Farm announced itself with a wooden sign so weathered I could barely read it. I turned onto a gravel driveway that wound through overgrown fields where wheat or corn or something had once grown, but now only weeds flourished. The house sat at the end of the drive, a two-story farmhouse that had been white once but had faded to the color of old bones. I parked next to a rusted pickup truck and sat for a moment, gathering courage. What was I even supposed to say? Your friend Frank, who you haven't spoken to in 40 years, wants me to tell you he's sorry? This was insane. Before I could change my mind, the front door opened. A man stepped onto the porch. Walter Cunningham was tall, maybe 6'2", with a frame that had been powerful once, but was now lean in the way of men who work hard and eat sparingly. His hair was completely white, pulled back in a short ponytail. His face was weathered, mapped with lines that spoke of decades in the sun. But his eyes were what stopped me. Blue, pale blue, and looking at me with an intensity that made me feel like he could see straight through to whatever was left of my soul. I got out of the car. The man on the porch didn't move, just watched me walk toward him. Mr. Cunningham, I said. My name is Daniel Morrison, Frank Morrison's son. The change in his expression was instantaneous. His whole body went rigid, and for a second I thought he might turn and go back inside. But he didn't. He just stood there, staring at me like I was a ghost. "Frank," he said finally. His voice was deep, rough from years of not using it much. "How is he?" "He had a stroke 2 months ago. He's in assisted living. He wanted me to come here. He wanted me to tell you something." Walter Cunningham's jaw worked. His hands, I noticed, had gone to fists at his sides. After a long moment, he gestured to the chairs on the porch. "Sit." We sat. The chair creaked under my weight. Across from me, Walter leaned back and closed his eyes, and I saw something move across his face. Pain, maybe, or memory. "What did Frank want you to tell me?" he asked without opening his eyes. "That he's sorry, that he was wrong, that he should have said it 40 years ago." Walter's eyes opened. They were wet now, catching the afternoon light. 40 years, he repeated. 40 goddamn years. There was silence between us. Somewhere a crow called. The wind moved through the overgrown fields, making them whisper. "I don't know what happened between you," I said carefully. "My father didn't explain. He just said he owed you an apology and he wanted me to deliver it." Walter looked at me then, really looked at me, and I felt exposed under that gaze in a way I hadn't felt since I was a child. "You look like him," he said, "like Frank when we were young, before everything went to hell. Can you tell me what happened?" Another long pause. Then Walter stood up, walked to the porch railing, and looked out over his failing farm. When he spoke, his voice was distant, like he was talking to himself more than to me. "Your father and I grew up together in Hannibal. We were closer than brothers. Went to Vietnam together in '68, came back together in '70. We were going to build something, you know? We had dreams. Opened an auto repair shop in '72, Morrison and Cunningham Auto Repair. We were partners. We were going to make it work." He turned back to face me. "Then what happened? '78, recession hit. Our biggest customers went under owing us money. We had debts we couldn't pay. The bank was going to foreclose. And I blame Frank. He was handling the books, see? I thought if he'd been smarter, more careful, we could have survived. I said things, terrible things, told him he'd ruined everything, told him he wasn't fit to be my partner." Walter's voice cracked. He cleared his throat hard. Frank didn't fight back. He just took it, took all the poison I threw at him, and then he left, moved to St. Louis. I never saw him again. Never called, never wrote. 40 years of silence because I was too proud to admit I was wrong. "Why were you wrong?" I asked. "Because it wasn't his fault. Because I was the one who pushed us to expand too fast, to take on debt we couldn't service. Because I made the decisions that sank us and I needed someone to blame, so I blamed my best friend. And I've lived with that for 40 years, every single day." He sat back down, suddenly looking older than his 76 years. "And now you're here, Frank Morrison's son, delivering an apology I don't deserve." "He sent me here for a reason," I said. "He said you'd know why when you saw me." Walter studied me again with those pale blue eyes. "What are you running from, Daniel Morrison?" The question caught me off guard. "I don't—" "Yes, you do. I can see it in you. Same thing I saw in Frank's eyes the last time I looked at him. Fear of what you've become, of what you've lost, of what you threw away chasing something that didn't matter." I felt something hot behind my eyes. "I don't know what I'm running from." "That's because you're standing still for the first time in 30 years, Walter said. "Hard to see the truth when you're always moving. But now you're here and you can't run. So I'll ask you again. What are you afraid of?" I opened my mouth to deny it, to tell him he didn't know me, didn't know what he was talking about. But I couldn't, because he was right. I was afraid. "I'm afraid I wasted my life," I said, and my voice came out broken. "I'm afraid I destroyed my family for a career that meant nothing. I'm afraid I'm 52 years old and I don't know who I am without a job title. I'm afraid my children hate me and they're right to hate me. I'm afraid I'm going to die alone in a house that was never a home and no one will care." The words came out in a rush, things I'd never said to anyone, barely admitted to myself. And when they were done, I felt empty, hollowed out. Walter nodded slowly. "Good," he said. "Good? You're ready now? Ready for what? For what your father sent you here to find." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I'm 76 years old, Daniel. I've got this farm, 200 acres of land that's been in my family for 4 generations. My wife died 10 years ago. My children moved away and don't call. I can't work it alone anymore. I've been thinking about selling, letting some corporation turn it into a subdivision or a shopping center, letting everything my family built just disappear. He paused. Or I could make your father an offer I should have made 40 years ago. Partnership. I don't understand. I need someone to help me bring in one more harvest. Just one. The wheat in those fields, it's the last crop I'm going to plant. I need hands, strong hands, a partner. Someone who's got nothing to lose and everything to prove. He smiled, and it was hard in knowing. Someone who's 52 years old and needs to learn what matters before it's too late. You want me to work your farm? I want to offer you the same deal I would have offered your father if I hadn't been such a damn fool. Live in the worker's cabin. Help me harvest the wheat this fall, 40% of the profits. After that, we talk about what comes next. Maybe you stay, maybe you don't. But either way, you'll have done something real, something with your hands, something that matters. I have no idea how to farm. Neither did I when I started. You'll learn. Question is, do you want to learn, or do you want to go back to St. Louis and keep running? The question hung in the air between us. Behind Walter, the sun was starting to sink toward the horizon, painting the overgrown wheat fields gold. I thought about my empty house, my empty life, my daughter who wouldn't speak to me, and my son who changed his number. I thought about my father in that nursing home bed, looking at me with eyes that knew what I was. A man who'd built a life out of running away from himself. I'll do it, I heard myself say. I'll stay. Walter's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes softened. When can you start? Now, I said. I can start right now. He stood up, offered me his hand. We shook. His grip was calloused, strong, the grip of a man who'd worked for everything he had. Welcome to Meadowbrook Farm, Daniel Morrison, he said. Fair warning, it's going to be the hardest thing you've ever done. Good, I said, surprised by my own voice. I'm tired of things being easy. That night, I moved my few belongings into the worker's cabin, a small 2-room structure about a quarter-mile from the main house. It had a bed, a table, a kitchenette, and not much else. No television, no internet. Just 4 walls and a roof and the sound of the wind moving through the wheat fields. I lay in that unfamiliar bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to sounds I hadn't heard in decades. Crickets, the creak of old wood settling, the vast silence of the countryside. I thought about calling my daughter Emma, telling her where I was, what I was doing. But what would I say? That I'd run away to a farm? That I was trying to figure out who I was? She'd think I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. Just before sleep took me, I had a thought that felt like it came from somewhere outside myself. This is where you're supposed to be. I didn't believe it. Not yet. But I held on to it anyway, like a man drowning holds onto driftwood. Tomorrow, Walter had told me, we start at sunrise. I'll teach you what you need to know. And the first thing you need to know is this. Farming doesn't care about your past. Doesn't care who you were or what you lost. The land only cares about what you're willing to give it right now, today, in this moment. I closed my eyes. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt something that might have been hope. It was fragile, barely there, like the first green shoot pushing through hard soil. But it was there, and that, I thought as sleep finally came, might be enough to start with. The sun rose at 5:43 on my first morning as a farmhand, and it found me already awake, sitting on the steps of the worker's cabin with a cup of instant coffee that tasted like dirt and regret. I'd slept maybe 3 hours, waking every time the old building creaked or an unfamiliar sound drifted through the darkness. City noise I could sleep through without noticing. Traffic, sirens, the constant hum of civilization. But out here, the silence was loud enough to keep me awake. Walter appeared at 6, walking across the dewy grass from the main house with a thermos under one arm and 2 biscuits wrapped in a cloth napkin. He handed me one without a word, sat down beside me on the steps, and we ate in silence while the sky turned from gray to gold. First lesson, he said, when we'd finished, farming is 90% waiting and 10% panic. Right now, we're in the waiting part. Wheat's not ready to harvest for another 8 weeks. But that doesn't mean there's nothing to do. It means we do everything that needs doing before the panic starts. What needs doing? Everything, Walter said. He stood up, joints cracking like small caliber gunfire. Equipment needs checking, fixing, greasing, Fences need mending, irrigation systems need testing, and you need to learn how all of it works before you're operating it alone in the middle of a field at midnight because we're racing a rainstorm. He led me to a massive barn that leaned slightly to the east, its red paint faded to the color of dried blood. Inside, it smelled like motor oil and hay and decades of accumulated work. A John Deere combine harvester sat in the center like a sleeping dinosaur, covered in dust and bird droppings. "This is what's going to bring in the crop," Walter said, patting the machine's side. "She's 30 years old, breaks down twice a season, and I love her more than most people I've met. By the end of summer, you will too." I looked at the machine. It was enormous, complicated, covered in parts I didn't recognize and couldn't name. "I have no idea how to operate that." "You will," Walter said, "because I'm going to teach you, and because if you don't learn, we don't eat." Motivation's a hell of a teacher. For the next 3 hours, he walked me through every component of the combine: the header that cut the wheat, the threshing drum that separated grain from chaff, the grain tank, the unloading auger, the engine that powered it all. His hands moved over the machine with the confidence of long familiarity, pointing out worn belts that needed replacing, filters that needed cleaning, grease fittings that needed attention. I tried to remember everything. Failed. My head was full of terminology that meant nothing to me. Concave clearance, rotor speed, shoe adjustment. It was like learning a foreign language while someone spoke it at full speed. "Don't worry about remembering it all now," Walter said, seeing my frustration. "You'll learn by doing. The machine will teach you what she needs. You just have to pay attention." By noon, my back was aching from bending over the engine compartment. My hands were black with grease, and I'd hit my head on a low-hanging beam hard enough to see stars. We broke for lunch. Walter made sandwiches from leftover roast beef and white bread, served them with sweet tea so cold it made my teeth hurt. "How long did it take you to learn all this?" I asked. "Still learning," Walter said. "Farming's like that. You think you've figured it out, then the weather changes or the market shifts or a machine breaks in a way you've never seen before. Humility's the only attitude that works." We ate in silence for a while. Through the kitchen window, I could see the wheat field stretching away to the tree line, the stalks moving in waves under the wind. It was beautiful in a way I hadn't expected, hadn't let myself see. "Can I ask you something?" I said. Walter nodded. "Why are you doing this? Helping me, I mean. You don't know me, I'm your ex-partner's son, but that's not a reason to trust me with your farm." Walter set down his sandwich and looked at me with those pale blue eyes. "Because your father asked me to. Because I owe him 40 years of friendship I threw away. Because I see something in you that reminds me of myself at your age. Lost, angry, running from something I couldn't name." "Were you running?" "From the war," he said quietly. "Vietnam. Your father and I, we saw things over there, did things. When we came back, we weren't the same people who'd left. I thought working the land would fix me. Thought building something with my hands would erase what my hands had done. Did it work?" Walter smiled, and it was sad. "Some. Enough." He stood up, carried his plate to the sink. "The land doesn't judge you for what you were. It only cares what you're willing to be now. That's a gift, Daniel. Not many things in life give you that." The afternoon brought new lessons. Walter taught me to drive the tractor, an ancient farmall that required strength to steer and timing to shift. I stalled it 6 times, ground the gears twice, and nearly drove it into a ditch before I started to get the feel of it. "Farming machines don't have power steering or automatic transmissions," Walter said as I wrestled with the wheel. "They require you to be present. Pay attention. You drift off thinking about something else, you end up in trouble." Good metaphor for life, actually. By sunset, I was exhausted in a way I'd never experienced in 25 years of sales work. This wasn't the mental fatigue of too many meetings or the stress of quarterly targets. This was bone-deep tiredness, the kind that came from using muscles I didn't know I had. My hands were blistered. My shoulders screamed. My lower back felt like someone had taken a baseball bat to it. Walter walked me back to the cabin as the light faded. "You did good today," he said. "Tomorrow will hurt worse. Your body's not used to this. Give it 2 weeks and it'll adapt. Give it 2 months and you'll be stronger than you've been in 20 years. "I hope I make it 2 weeks, I said. "You will." He paused at the cabin door. "Daniel, can I give you some advice?" "Sure." "Call your daughter. I saw you looking at your phone during lunch. Whatever's between you two, start fixing it now, because time moves faster than you think, And one day you look up and 40 years have gone by and the person you needed to talk to is gone. He left before I could respond. I stood on the cabin steps, holding my phone, looking at Emma's contact information. My thumb hovered over her name. What would I even say? I practiced opening lines in my head. They all sounded hollow. Instead, I called my mother. She answered on the first ring, like always. "Danny," she said, "how are you?" "I'm on a farm, Mom, working for Dad's old friend Walter." "I know," she said. "Your father told me. How is it?" "Hard. Really hard, but I think maybe that's the point." My mother made a soft sound that might have been approval. "Your father's been different since you went to see Walter." Calmer, like a weight came off him. "Mom, what happened between them?" "Dad said he owed Walter an apology, but he didn't say why." There was a pause. "That's their story to tell, Danny. But I'll say this. Your father made a mistake 40 years ago, and he's carried the guilt ever since. Carrying guilt that long, it changes you, makes you hard, makes you push away the people who love you because you don't think you deserve their love." She paused again, and when she spoke, her voice was softer. "He pushed you away, Danny, not because he didn't love you, because he loved you too much and thought you deserved better than a father who'd failed at everything that mattered." The words hit me like a physical blow. Is that what he thinks? It's what he's always thought. My mother's voice cracked slightly. "And maybe you believed him. Maybe you pushed back because you were hurt or ashamed or angry. But you're both wrong, Danny. You both deserve love. You both deserve forgiveness. From each other and from yourselves." I stood there in the gathering darkness, holding the phone, feeling something crack open in my chest. "Mom," I said, "I don't know how to fix this." "You start by staying," she said, "by doing the work, by learning what Walter has to teach you. The rest will come." After we hung up, I sat on the steps and I did something I hadn't done since I was a child. I cried. Not the angry tears of frustration or the bitter tears of self-pity, just deep, wrenching sobs that felt like they were tearing something loose inside me. Grief for the years I'd wasted, for the relationships I'd destroyed, for the man I'd become and the man I'd failed to be. When it was over, I felt empty, hollow, but also lighter, like I'd put down a weight I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten it was there. The next morning hurt worse, just like Walter had promised. Every muscle in my body screamed protest when I tried to get out of bed. I moved like an old man, shuffling to the tiny bathroom, looking at myself in the mirror. I looked different. My skin was already darker from a day in the sun. My eyes were bloodshot, but clearer somehow. I looked like a man who'd worked for a living. The routine became familiar over the following weeks. Wake before sunrise, coffee with Walter, 8 to 10 hours of physical labor that left me too tired to think about anything except food and sleep. Dinner alone in the cabin, usually something simple I could heat on the ancient stove. Collapse into bed and wake up to do it all again. Walter was a patient teacher, but a demanding one. He showed me how to mend fence, stretching wire until my hands bled through the work gloves, how to clear irrigation ditches, shoveling mud and debris in 90-degree heat, how to service the tractor, changing oil and filters, learning the machine's quirks and temperaments. And every evening he'd share one piece of wisdom, not in a preachy way, just casual observations that landed like depth charges in my consciousness. "The land will teach you patience if you let it," he said one night as we watched the sun set over the wheat fields. "You can't rush a crop, can't force it to grow faster because you want it to. You plant the seed, provide what it needs, and then you wait." Most people never learn that lesson. They spend their whole lives trying to force things that need time. Another evening, as we repaired a broken irrigation pump, he said, "Every machine breaks eventually. Every system fails. The question isn't if, it's when and how you respond. You can rage against it or you can fix it and move on. One wastes energy, the other builds something." I absorbed these lessons the way the dry ground absorbed water, desperately, gratefully. 3 weeks in, I started video calling my father every evening. The conversations were stilted at first, awkward silences punctuated by small updates about my day. But gradually something shifted. My father started asking questions about the work, about Walter, about the land. His speech was improving with therapy, words coming easier. One evening he said something that stopped me cold. "You sound happy, son." "I don't know about happy," I said, "but I'm here. I'm present. I'm not running." His eyes filled with tears. "That's all I ever wanted for you." "Why didn't you tell me?" He shook his head slowly. because I thought you needed to figure it out yourself, and because I was ashamed of failing the business with Walt, of not being the father you deserved, of not being more than a mechanic with dirty hands. Dad, I said, there's nothing wrong with dirty hands. I know that now, he said, but I didn't know it then. I wanted you to have clean hands, wear a suit, be someone important. And you did all that, but you weren't happy. No, I admitted, I wasn't. Are you happy now? I looked around the cabin, at my dirt-covered work clothes hanging on a hook, at my calloused hands. I'm getting there. It was week 5 when Sarah Mackenzie drove up to the farm in a white pickup truck with a veterinary practice logo on the door. I was in the north field checking irrigation lines covered in mud up to my knees when I heard the engine. By the time I walked back to the barn, she was already there talking to Walter about one of his cows. She was maybe 48, 49, with blonde hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and brown eyes that assessed everything with the calm competence of someone who'd seen it all. She wore jeans and a work shirt, boots that had clearly seen real work. No makeup, no jewelry except a simple silver ring on her right hand. She was the most beautiful woman I'd seen in years. This is Daniel Morrison, Walter said as I approached. Frank's son. He's helping me bring in the harvest. Sarah extended her hand. We shook. Her grip was firm, her palm calloused like mine were becoming. Sarah Mackenzie, large animal vet. I take care of Walt's livestock. Livestock? I looked at Walter. You have livestock? 3 cows, 2 horses, a dozen chickens, Walter said. Not exactly a ranch, but they keep me company. Bessie here's got mastitis. Sarah's treating her. We walked to the small barn where the cows were kept. Sarah worked with efficient grace, examining the cow, preparing antibiotics, explaining what she was doing in terms I could mostly understand. I found myself watching her hands, the confident way they moved, the gentleness in them despite their obvious strength. You're new to farming, she said. It wasn't a question. That obvious? She smiled and something in my chest shifted. You've got the look. City hands trying to become country hands. I've seen it before. Did they make it? The ones you saw before? Some did, some didn't. The difference was usually whether they were running towards something or away from something. Which is better? She considered this while she finished with the cow. Toward is better, but sometimes you have to run away first before you figure out what you're running toward. We walked back to her truck. Walter had disappeared into the house, leaving us alone. Sarah loaded her equipment into the truck bed, moving with the efficiency of long practice. Can I ask you something? I said. She nodded. Why are you out here? Hannibal's not exactly a hub of veterinary opportunity. You could make more money in a city practice. She looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something move behind her eyes. Pain, maybe, or memory. I was in Kansas City, she said. Had a good practice, good life, good husband. Then my husband got sick, pancreatic cancer. He died 2 years ago after 18 months of fighting. I'm sorry. She shrugged, but it wasn't casual. It was the gesture of someone who'd learned to carry grief without letting it show. After he died, I couldn't stay in the city. Everything there reminded me of him, of us, of what I'd lost. So I came back here. This is where I grew up, where I learned to be a vet working with my father. I thought maybe I could heal myself by healing animals. Did it work? Still finding out, she said. But it helps. Being useful, serving something bigger than my own sadness. She climbed into the truck, started the engine. You're doing the same thing, aren't you? Trying to heal by being useful. Maybe, I admitted. Good luck, Daniel Morrison, she said. See you around. She drove away, and I stood there watching her taillights disappear down the gravel road, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Interest. Possibility. The sense that maybe there was still room in my broken life for something new. Walter emerged from the house with a knowing smile. Sarah's good people, he said. Lost her husband a couple years back. Been alone ever since. I noticed she's not wearing a wedding ring. She took it off about 6 months ago, Walter said. Sign of healing, I think. Being ready to move on doesn't mean forgetting. It just means making space for what comes next. That night, I lay in bed thinking about Sarah. About the pain in her eyes that matched the pain in mine. About the strength it took to leave a life behind and start over. About what it meant to run towards something instead of away from something. I picked up my phone. This time I didn't hesitate. I called Emma. She answered on the 5th ring, her voice cautious. Dad? Hey, sweetie. I know it's late. I just wanted to hear your voice. There was a long silence. Then, Where are you? Mom said you lost your job. I'm on a farm in Missouri, working for an old friend of Grandpa's. Another pause. A farm, you. I know it sounds crazy. It is crazy, but I'm here and I'm learning, and I wanted you to know that I'm trying to be better, to be different, to be the father I should have been. I heard her breath catch. Dad, Before she could finish, I heard it. A sound I'd heard thousands of times before, but never from my daughter. She was crying. Emma, what's wrong? I'm pregnant, she said, the words tumbling out fast like she'd been holding them in too long. 3 months. James left me when I told him. Said he wasn't ready to be a father. I didn't know who to call. I didn't know what to do. My heart broke and swelled at the same time. Oh, honey. I'm sorry, she said. I know I haven't talked to you in years. I know I said I never wanted to see you again. But I'm scared and I don't know what to do, and I just needed to hear. Her voice broke. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles went white. Emma, listen to me. You have nothing to apologize for. Nothing. I'm the one who should apologize. I'm the one who wasn't there. But I'm here now, and I will be here for you and for your baby. Whatever you need. She was crying harder now. I don't know what I need. Then come here, I said. Come to the farm. Stay with me. Figure it out here where it's quiet, where you have time to think. Please. The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. Then okay, I'll come. This weekend. I'll be here, I said. I'm not going anywhere. After we hung up, I sat in the darkness of the cabin, my mind racing. Emma was pregnant. My daughter was going to have a baby. I was going to be a grandfather. The thought terrified me and thrilled me in equal measure. I thought about all the moments I'd missed with Emma. Her soccer games, her school plays, her high school graduation. The years I'd sacrificed at the altar of my career, convinced I was building something important, when all I was really building was distance between myself and the people who mattered. I couldn't get those years back. But maybe I could be there for her now. Maybe I could be there for my grandchild in a way I hadn't been there for my own children. Walter found me the next morning, sitting on the cabin steps, staring at nothing. He sat down beside me, handed me coffee without a word. My daughter's coming this weekend, I said. She's pregnant. The father left her. Walter nodded slowly. That's hard. I don't know how to help her. I don't even know how to talk to her. We haven't really spoken in 3 years. You don't need to know, Walter said. You just need to be here. Presence is the gift, Daniel. Everything else follows from that. On Friday afternoon, I drove Walter's truck to the Hannibal train station to pick up Emma. I was nervous in a way I hadn't been nervous in years. I kept checking my reflection in the rearview mirror, seeing a man I barely recognized. Tan skin, calloused hands, lines around my eyes from squinting in the sun. I looked older, but also somehow younger, more alive. The train pulled in at 4:37. I watched passengers disembark, scanning for Emma. When I saw her, my breath caught. She was beautiful, tall like her mother, with my dark hair and her own fierce intelligence in her eyes. She wore a loose dress, and if I looked carefully, I could see the slightest curve to her belly, the beginning of the life growing inside her. She saw me and stopped. For a moment, I thought she might turn around and get back on the train. Then she walked toward me, slow and uncertain. We stood facing each other on the platform, years of silence between us, years of hurt and anger and disappointment. Hi, Dad, she said finally. Hi, baby girl. Her face crumpled. Don't call me that. You don't get to call me that. Okay, I said. I'm sorry. She wiped her eyes angrily. You look different. I am different, or trying to be. We drove to the farm in silence. Emma stared out the window at the passing fields, her hand resting on her belly. I wanted to say something, anything, to bridge the gap between us, but I couldn't find the words. Walter was waiting on the porch when we arrived. He came down the steps as Emma got out of the truck, and I saw something in his eyes, kindness, understanding. You must be Emma, he said. I'm Walter Cunningham, old friend of your grandfather's. Welcome to Meadowbrook Farm. Emma shook his hand. Thank you for having me. Your father's been working hard, Walter said. Learning fast. I think you'll be proud of him. Emma looked at me, and I couldn't read her expression. We'll see, she said. I showed her to the cabin. Walter had helped me clean it up, had brought over extra blankets and pillows, had even put wildflowers in a jar on the small table. Emma looked around the 2 rooms, at the simple furniture, at the window that looked out over the wheat fields. This is where you've been living? She asked. For 5 weeks now. She sat down on the bed, suddenly looking exhausted. It's very quiet. Yeah, takes some getting used to. She looked up at me, and her eyes were wet again. I'm scared, Dad. I sat down beside her, careful not to touch her, not sure if I was allowed. I know, honey. I don't know how to be a mother. I don't know how to do this alone. You're not alone, I said. You have me. You have your grandmother. You have people who love you. But I don't have James. Her voice broke on his name. He said he loved me. He said we were going to build a life together. And then when I told him about the baby, he just left, packed his stuff and left. Then he's a fool, I said, and his loss is the world's gain, because this baby is going to be incredible. And you're going to be an incredible mother. How do you know? Because I've watched you your whole life. I've watched you fight for what you believe in. Stand up for people who can't stand up for themselves. Care about making the world better. Those are the things that make a good parent, Emma. Not perfection, not having all the answers, just giving a damn. She looked at me for a long moment. You were never there, Dad. Why should I believe you'll be here now? The words cut deep because they were true. You shouldn't, I said. I haven't earned your trust. But I'm asking for a chance to earn it. Not with words, with actions. With showing up every day and being present and not running away when things get hard. Emma nodded slowly. She wiped her eyes. Okay, one chance. That's all I'm asking for. That evening, the three of us ate dinner on Walter's porch. He'd made pot roast and vegetables. Simple food that tasted better than anything I'd eaten in months. Emma was quiet, picking at her food, clearly exhausted from the journey and the weight of everything she was carrying. Tell me about the farm, she said finally, looking at Walter. How long have you been here? 4 generations, Walter said. My great-grandfather homesteaded this land in 1885. 160 acres originally. We've added to it over the years. It's been my whole life, the only life I know. That must be nice, Emma said softly. Having roots like that, knowing where you belong. Walter smiled. Sometimes, other times it's a burden. Land ties you down, makes you responsible, makes you think about the future, about what you're leaving behind. What are you leaving behind, Emma asked. Walter looked at me, then back at Emma. I'm working on that, trying to find someone who'll take care of this place when I'm gone. Someone who understands it's not just dirt and crops. It's a legacy, a trust. After dinner, Emma excused herself, claiming exhaustion. I walked her back to the cabin, carrying her bag. At the door, she turned to me. This is weird, Dad. Being here with you, I don't know how to do this. Me neither, I admitted. But maybe that's okay. Maybe we just take it one day at a time and figure it out as we go. She nodded. She almost smiled. Good night, Dad. Good night, Emma. I walked back to the main house where Walter was cleaning up. He handed me a dish towel without a word, and we worked in comfortable silence. She's hurting, he said finally. Yeah, so are you. Yeah, that's good, he said. Means you're both still alive, still feeling. You can work with that. The next morning, I woke Emma before sunrise. She stumbled out of the cabin, bleary-eyed and confused. What are you doing? Come with me, I said. I want to show you something. We walked into the wheat fields, following the irrigation ditch toward the eastern edge of the property. The sky was just beginning to lighten, the darkness giving way to that strange blue-gray color that comes before dawn. We reached a small rise that looked out over the entire farm. 200 acres of wheat, the stalks heavy with grain now, ready for harvest. The breeze moved through them in waves, and in the growing light they looked like an ocean, golden and alive. Emma stood beside me, her hand unconsciously moving to her belly. It's beautiful, she whispered. Your grandfather used to bring me out here when we were kids, I said. Before everything went wrong between us and Walt. We'd watch the sunrise and he'd tell me about all the work that went into growing wheat, all the planning and planting and praying for rain, how every stalk represented hope. I looked at my daughter. I didn't understand what he meant then. I thought it was just farmer talk. But I get it now. Hope isn't something you feel. It's something you plant. You put it in the ground and you water it and you wait. And sometimes it grows into something beautiful. Emma was crying again, but quietly now. I think I understand, she said. We stood there together as the sun broke over the horizon, painting the wheat fields gold. And for the first time in years, I felt something that might have been peace. This, I thought, is what I've been running toward my whole life without knowing it. This moment, this place, this chance to be the father I should have been, the grandfather I could still become. The wheat fields whispered in the wind, and I heard in that sound something that might have been forgiveness, or maybe just possibility. Either way, I'd take it. Emma stayed. That was the first miracle. She moved into the cabin with me, and we learned to live in the same space after 3 years of silence. navigating around each other like strangers trying to remember how to be family. She was cautious with me, and I was careful with her, both of us walking on eggshells made of old hurt and newer hope. She started helping around the farm in small ways, feeding the chickens, gathering eggs, sitting on the porch with Walter in the evenings while he told stories about the land, about his wife Linda, who died 10 years before, about what it meant to tend something bigger than yourself. I'd watch them from a distance, Emma listening with her hand on her growing belly, and I'd feel something tight in my chest start to loosen. Sarah came by twice more over the next 2 weeks, once to check on Walter's cows, once to treat one of the horses for a stone bruise. Each time she stayed a little longer, accepting Walter's offer of coffee, asking questions about the farm, about the upcoming harvest. And each time I caught her looking at me when she thought I wasn't watching, something curious and cautious in her eyes. The third time she came, I was alone. Walter had driven into town for supplies, and Emma had gone with him, needing to see a doctor about the pregnancy. Sarah found me in the barn, greasing the combine's many fittings, preparing the massive machine for the work ahead. "You're getting the hang of it," she said from the doorway. I jumped, not having heard her truck. Getting there still feels like I'm one mistake away from destroying something expensive. "That feeling never goes away," she said, walking into the barn. "I've been a vet for 20 years and I still check everything 3 times before I make a cut." We worked in comfortable silence for a while, me continuing to grease fittings while she examined the barn cats, checking them for ear mites. The quiet between us wasn't awkward. It was the kind of silence that only happens between people who've both learned the value of not filling every moment with words. "Your daughter seems nice," Sarah said eventually. "Walter told me about her situation." "Yeah, she's going through a hard time. Must be difficult for you too. Becoming a grandfather." I paused in my work, considered the question. It's terrifying. I wasn't a good father. Now I get to fail at being a grandfather too. Sarah looked at me, and her eyes were kind but direct. "Or you get to do it right this time. Second chances don't usually come with a manual, Daniel. You just do your best and hope it's enough." "Is that what you're doing? Second chance?" She smiled, but it was sad around the edges. "Every day. Every single day I wake up and decide to live instead of just exist. Some days are easier than others." "What makes the easier days easier?" "Being useful. Helping something or someone who needs it." She finished with the cats, stood up, brushed hay off her jeans, and being around people who understand what it's like to rebuild yourself from scratch. Our eyes met and held. I felt something pass between us, unspoken but understood. Recognition, the kind that happens when 2 broken people see their own scars reflected in someone else. "Would you like to have dinner sometime?" I heard myself ask. The words came out before I'd fully thought them through. Sarah tilted her head, considering. "You mean like a date? Maybe? If that's not too weird. I'm living in a cabin on someone else's farm, learning a job I'm terrible at, trying to fix a relationship with a daughter who barely speaks to me. Not exactly prime dating material." She laughed, and it was genuine, warm. "Daniel, I'm a widow who moved back to her hometown to escape her grief and spends most of her time with animals because they're easier than people. We're a perfect match in our complete disaster status." "So is that a yes?" "It's a maybe. Ask me again after harvest. If you're still here, if you haven't run back to the city, then we'll talk." "Fair enough." She walked to the barn door, paused, looked back. "For what it's worth, I don't think you're terrible at this. The farming, I mean. Walter says you're learning fast. More importantly, he says you're not running. That counts for something." After she left, I stood in the barn with grease on my hands and hope in my chest, feeling like maybe, just maybe, I was building something real for the first time in my life. The next morning, Walter woke me before dawn. "Time to check the fences on the south boundary," he said. "Storm's coming tomorrow, and I want to make sure everything's secure before the rain hits." We loaded tools into the back of his truck and drove out to the far corner of the property, where the wheat fields met a stand of old oak trees. The air was heavy with the promise of weather, clouds building on the western horizon, the lights strange and golden. We worked our way along the fence line, Walter pointing out weak spots, showing me how to tension wire properly, how to set a post so it would last another 20 years. The work was methodical, peaceful. Just the sound of tools on wood and metal, the occasional comment about technique. We were 3/4 of the way along the boundary when Walter stopped, staring at a section of fence that had been completely knocked down. Fresh damage from the look of it, probably deer or wild hogs pushing through during the night. We'll have to rebuild this whole section, Walter said, which means digging new post holes. He grabbed the post hole digger from the truck and we started to work. The ground was hard, resistant. We took turns, one of us digging while the other cleared debris. It was exhausting work in the building heat, sweat soaking through our shirts. I was maybe 2 feet down on the third hole when the digger hit something solid, different from rock. Metal. Walter, I said, there's something here. He came over, looked down into the hole I dug. Probably old farm equipment. People used to bury broken machinery rather than haul it away, keep digging around it. I work more carefully now, using a shovel to clear dirt away from whatever I'd found. It took another 20 minutes before I could see what it was. A box, made of copper or bronze, about 2 feet long and a foot wide, covered in a thick patina of age. Walter went very still. His face had gone pale. "Oh my God," he whispered. "What? What is it?" "That's not possible. It can't be." Walter dropped to his knees beside the hole, reached down to touch the box with trembling fingers. "I buried this 35 years ago. I buried it and swore I'd never dig it up again." My heart was pounding now. "You knew this was here?" "I found it in 1985, he said, his voice distant, remembering. "Right around here, maybe 20 feet from this exact spot. I was repairing fence just like we are now, dug it up, opened it, saw what was inside, and I was so scared of what it meant that I reburied it and tried to forget about it." "What's inside?" Walter looked at me and his eyes were haunted. A test, a message, from a man who understood what it meant to lose everything and find something better. He said it would be found again when the time was right, when someone who needed it was working this land. "We need to dig it out," I said. Together we widened the hole, worked the box free from the earth that had held it for 33 years. It was heavier than I expected, solid, real. We lifted it out and set it on the grass. The copper had a deep green patina, beautiful in its way, marked with age and waiting. "Open it," Walter said. "This time I won't run from what's inside." I pried at the lid. It was sealed tight, corroded into place. Walter brought a screwdriver from the truck and we worked carefully around the edges, breaking the seal that time had created. After 15 minutes of patient effort, the lid gave way with a sound like a deep breath being released. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth that had somehow survived the decades, were several items. The first thing I saw was cash. Old bills, 20s and 50s, and hundreds, bound with twine that had rotted to threads. I counted it carefully. $8,000 in 1975 currency. Still legal tender. Beneath the money was a gold pocket watch, heavy in my hand, inscribed on the back. "To Samuel Winters for 30 years of faithful service, First Presbyterian Church, Pittsburgh, 1920 to 1950. There was a leather journal, surprisingly well preserved thanks to the oilcloth wrapping. The cover was embossed with a simple cross. The pages inside were filled with neat handwriting, dated entries spanning from 1920 to 1975. And there were 5 envelopes, thick paper, yellowed with age, each one numbered in Roman numerals, 1 through 5. But what stopped my heart was the letter lying on top of everything else. A single sheet of paper, covered in the same neat handwriting as the journal, addressed simply, "To whoever finds this." I read it aloud, my voice shaking. "To the one who finds this, I am Reverend Samuel Winters, and I am dying of heart disease. The doctors give me perhaps 6 months. I have no family to inherit my savings, so I entrust them to Providence. If you found this box, it means you are working this land, a sacred calling I once scorned. I was born wealthy. My father owned Winter Steel Company in Pittsburgh. We lost everything in the crash of 1929. I was 34 years old, penniless, with a degree in theology I'd never intended to use." I paused, looked at Walter. He was crying silently, tears running down his weathered face. I continued reading. "I became a traveling preacher in Missouri. Best decision of my life. I learned what it meant to serve, to be present, to value people over profit. These 5 envelopes contain lessons I learned too late. Open them in order when you face the trials I predict. Envelope 2 when you doubt your choice. Envelope 3 when you face loss. Envelope 4 when you must forgive. Envelope 5 when you find your purpose. The money is yours. Opt it to continue God's work. Farming feeds souls, not just bodies." Signed, Samuel Winters, April 12, 1975. The silence after I finished was profound. Walter was shaking, his hands covering his face. I sat there holding this message from a dead man who'd somehow known, 50 years ago, that someone would need exactly these words, exactly this gift. You opened this before, I said to Walter. What did you see? I saw everything that's here now, he said, his voice muffled by his hands. The money, the watch, the journal, the envelopes. I read the letter and I thought I was losing my mind. How could a man I barely knew predict my life? How could he know I'd be the one to find it? But you reburied it. Walter looked up, his eyes red. I was terrified. It felt like God was speaking to me directly, and I wasn't ready to listen. Linda was pregnant with our second child. Business was good. Life was good. I didn't need some dead preacher telling me about trials and purpose. So I put it all back in the box, buried it again, and convinced myself it was the right choice. He took a shuddering breath. 1 month later, Linda had a miscarriage, lost the baby at 6 months, almost died herself. And then the farm started failing, drought, debt, everything falling apart. And I wondered every day if I'd been punished for rejecting the message, for being too afraid to open those envelopes. Did you ever tell anyone? Only Linda. She said maybe it wasn't punishment. Maybe it was just life. And maybe the box would surface again when someone else needed it. She died of believing that, hoping for it. I looked down at the 5 envelopes, still sealed after all these years. The first one had different instructions. Open when you find this box, it said on the outside. I think we should open it, I said. Walter nodded. Go ahead. I broke the seal carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper, covered in that same neat handwriting. I read it aloud. To the person who has discovered this box, you are afraid. I know this because I was afraid every day of my life after losing my fortune. Fear is not weakness. It is wisdom's warning system. But you cannot let it stop you from moving forward. The question is not whether you are afraid. The question is what you will do despite your fear. I spent 5 years paralyzed after losing my wealth. 5 years of bitterness and anger and questioning God. Then one day I was offered a position as a traveling minister. $50 a month and room and board in strangers' homes. I was terrified. I had no experience, no calling that I could feel, no certainty it would work. I looked up. Walter was leaning forward, hanging on every word. I continued. But I said yes, not because I had faith, because I had nothing left to lose. And in saying yes to that one terrified step, I found my life, found meaning, found purpose, found joy in the most unlikely places. So here is my first message to you. Say yes to the work in front of you, to the people who need you, to the possibility that your life might still mean something even though you cannot see how. Say yes despite your fear. Say yes because of it. The other envelopes will guide you through what comes next. But first you must choose to stay. Signed, Samuel Winters. The words settled over us like a benediction. I folded the letter carefully, put it back in the envelope. Around us, the wheat fields whispered in the rising wind. The storm was getting closer. I could smell rain in the air. What are you going to do? Walter asked. I looked at the box, at the money that could solve immediate problems, at the envelopes that promised guidance I desperately needed, at the journal of a man who'd lost everything and found something better. I'm going to say yes, I said, to all of it. That night, we brought the box back to Walter's house and spread its contents on the kitchen table. Emma was there, having returned from her doctor's appointment with good news. The baby was healthy, everything was progressing normally. She'd been smiling when we walked in, but the smile faded when she saw our faces. What happened? She asked. We told her the story, the box, the money, the letters from a dead minister who'd somehow predicted the future. She listened with growing wonder, occasionally reaching out to touch the journal, the envelopes, handling them with the reverence they deserved. This is impossible, she said when we finished. But it's real. It's right here. Real as anything I've ever touched, Walter said. I ran from it once. Daniel's not going to make the same mistake. Emma picked up the journal, opened it to a random page. The entry was dated June 3rd, 1947. I started reading it aloud. Today I visited the Patterson family. They have lost their youngest son to polio. Emily Patterson, the mother, asked me why God would take a child. I had no answer. No platitude felt right. So I simply sat with her and held her hand while she cried. Sometimes presence is the only honest response to suffering. Sometimes being there is enough, more than enough. Emma's eyes filled with tears. She closed the journal carefully. He understood, she said, what it's like to hurt, to not have answers, to just need someone to be there. She looked at me, and I saw something shift in her expression. You're here, Dad. You're actually here. I'm not going anywhere, I said. That night, I sat alone in the cabin with the journal, reading entry after entry. Samuel Winters had been a complicated man, brilliant, flawed, honest about his doubts and failures. He wrote about losing his faith and finding it again, about moments of profound connection with strangers, about the crushing loneliness of the road, about small kindnesses that sustained him. One entry from January 1962 stopped me cold. I met a farmer today who asked me if I ever regretted leaving my old life, giving up wealth and status to be a poor preacher. I told him the truth. Every comfort I lost was replaced by something better. Every possession I surrendered made room for an experience I never would have had. I was rich and miserable. Now I am poor and alive. I would not trade one for the other. I thought about my own lost life, the career, the salary, the title, the empty house and emptier relationships. Had I really lost anything, or had I just made room for something better? The rain started around midnight, soft at first, then building to a steady downpour. I lay in bed listening to a drum on the cabin roof, thinking about the envelopes I hadn't opened yet. Envelope 2, when you doubt your choice. That one was coming. I could feel it. The doubts were already circling, questions about whether I could really do this, whether I was fooling myself, whether this was just running in a different direction. But there was also something else, something that felt like possibility. Like maybe Samuel Winters was right. Maybe saying yes despite fear was the only way forward. The storm lasted through the night and into the next day. Walter declared it a rest day, giving the land time to absorb the rain, giving us time to recover from the shock of the discovery. Emma spent the morning reading the journal, marking pages she found meaningful. I watched her from the kitchen where I was helping Walter prepare lunch. She needs this, Walter said quietly. Needs to know someone else has walked through darkness and found light. We all need it. He looked at me seriously. Are you ready for what comes next? Opening those envelopes, facing what they might tell you. I don't know, but I'm going to do it anyway. That's the spirit Winters is talking about. Courage is an absence of fear. It's action, despite it. Sarah called that afternoon. Walter answered, spoke with her briefly, then handed me the phone. I heard you found something interesting, she said. News travels fast. Small town. Walter told me the basics. A box, letters, money. There's more to it than that, I said. Much more. Would you like to come see? I'd like that. Tomorrow, after I finish my rounds? Tomorrow's good. There was a pause on the line, then her voice softer. I'm glad you're still there, Daniel. Still choosing to stay. Me too, I said, and I meant it. That evening, the three of us sat on Walter's porch watching the sun break through the clouds, painting the wet wheat fields gold and green. Emma had the journal open on her lap, reading passages aloud that spoke to her. Listen to this one, she said. It's from 1953. I met a young woman today who was with child but unmarried. She was ashamed, certain God had abandoned her. I told her that God does not abandon us in our mistakes. He meets us there. The question is whether we will meet him back, whether we will accept the gift wrapped in circumstances we did not choose. Emma looked up at me, her hand on her belly. That's me. I'm that woman. And you're meeting the gift, I said. You're choosing to see this baby as blessing, not burden. That takes courage. I'm terrified, she admitted. So am I. So is everyone who's ever brought a child into this world. But we do it anyway, because love is worth the terror. Walter cleared his throat. Your father's becoming wise, Emma. Give him time and he might actually figure out what he's doing. We all laughed and it felt good. Natural. Like maybe we were becoming something real. A family stitched together from broken pieces, held in place by hope and second chances. The next afternoon, Sarah arrived carrying a basket covered with a checkered cloth. I brought pie, she said. Apple. Seemed appropriate given the occasion. We sat in Walter's kitchen, the box's contents spread before us, and I told her everything. About finding it, about Walter discovering it 35 years earlier and reburying it in fear, about Samuel Winters and his journey from wealthy man to poor preacher, about the 5 envelopes and the lessons they contained. Sarah listened intently, asking questions, running her fingers over the journal's worn cover. This is extraordinary, she said. and a little terrifying, like the universe is speaking directly to you. That's exactly how I felt when I found it, Walter said. Still scares me. Sarah looked at the unopened envelopes. Have you opened any others yet? Just the first one, I said. The rest are waiting. For what? For the right time. Winter said to open envelope 2 when I doubt my choice. I figure that moment will make itself known. And what if it already has? Sarah asked gently. What if right now, sitting here looking at all this, you're already doubting? I considered that. Maybe you're right. Then open it, Emma said. We're all here. Whatever it says, you won't face it alone. I picked up envelope 2. My hands were shaking slightly. The paper was heavy, expensive even by 1970s standards. I broke the seal and pulled out the letter inside. To the person who has discovered this box, I read aloud. You are doubting. You are wondering if you made the right choice. If you should stay or go back to your old life. If this work matters. If you matter. I know this because I doubted every single day for the first 5 years of my ministry. I would wake in the night in some stranger's spare bedroom and think, what am I doing? I had credentials, education, family name. I could have rebuilt my career in business. Instead, I am here eating charity meals, sleeping on borrowed beds, preaching to people who have less than nothing. I paused, the words hitting too close to home. Continue, Sarah said softly. But here is what I learned about doubt. I read on. Doubt is not the opposite of faith. It is faith's companion. It forces you to examine why you are doing what you are doing, to strip away the easy answers and find the truth underneath. I doubted my calling until one day in October 1933. I was in a small town in Missouri. There was a farmer, a man named John Hastings, whose daughter had died. He asked me to perform the funeral. I did not know what to say. I had no words of comfort. But I stood with that family and I wept with them. And afterward, John Hastings took my hand and said, thank you for being here, for not pretending you had answers, for being human with us. Walter made a sound, half sob, half laugh. I looked up. Tears were running down his face. Keep reading, he said. That was the moment I understood, I continued. My purpose was not to have answers. It was to be present, to show up, to stand with people in their pain and their joy and not run away. So here is my challenge for you. Do one thing today for someone else, expecting nothing in return. Then do it again tomorrow. Do it for 40 days. By the end, you will know if you should stay. Not because the doubt will be gone, but because you will understand that doubt does not matter. Action matters. Presence matters. Love matters. Everything else is just noise. I set the letter down. The kitchen was silent except for the ticking of Walter's old clock on the wall. 40 days, Emma said. That's specific. It's biblical, Sarah said. Jesus in the wilderness. Moses on the mountain. 40 days is the traditional period of testing and transformation. Can you do it? Walter asked me. I looked around the table at these 3 people. An old man who'd given me a chance I didn't deserve. A daughter who was learning to trust me again. A woman who was teaching me that broken things could heal. People who needed me to be present, to show up, to not run. Yes, I said, I can do it. And so I did. Starting that evening, I committed to 40 days of service. Not grand gestures, small things. Daily things. Things that required me to be present and aware and giving. I cooked breakfast for Walter every morning, learning his preferences, the way he liked his coffee strong and his eggs over easy. I walked with Emma each evening, listening to her fears about motherhood, about raising a child alone, about whether she was strong enough. I helped Sarah with her rounds when she needed an extra pair of hands, holding animals steady while she examined them, learning the patience required to work with frightened creatures. I called my father every night, video calls that grew longer as his speech continued to improve. We talked about the farm, about the box, about Samuel Winters and his message. And slowly, carefully, we talked about the years we'd lost, the hurt between us, the love that had always been there even when we couldn't speak it. On day 7, my father said something that broke me open. I'm proud of you, son, not for what you've accomplished, for who you're becoming. On day 15, Emma asked me to come to her next doctor's appointment. She wanted me to hear the baby's heartbeat. We sat in the examination room together, and when that tiny, rapid beating filled the space, I cried. Emma took my hand and held it. That's your grandchild, she said, and you're going to know them. You're going to be there. On day 23, Sarah and I had dinner together. Not a date, we both insisted, just 2 friends sharing a meal. But something shifted that night. We talked about our losses, her husband Jake, my marriage to Linda, the lives we'd planned that had fallen apart, the lives we were building from the rubble. "Do you think Winters is right?" she asked as we sat on her porch watching fireflies. "That we can find purpose in the pain?" "I think we have to believe that," I said. "Otherwise, it's all just random suffering." She reached over and took my hand. We sat like that for a long time, not speaking, just being present with each other in the darkness. By day 30, I realized something had changed. The doubts were still there. I still woke up some mornings wondering what I was doing, whether this was real, whether it would last. But the doubts had become background noise. What mattered was the work in front of me, the people who needed me, the small daily choices to show up and be present and not run. On day 40, Walter declared it was time to begin harvest preparations in earnest. The wheat was almost ready. Another week, maybe two. We needed the combine running perfectly, needed the grain trucks ready, needed every system checked and double-checked. "You've changed," he said as we worked on the combine's engine. "Stronger, steadier, like you found your footing." "I think I have," I said, "but I also think that's what these 40 days were for, not to eliminate doubt, to prove I could work through it." "Winters knew what he was doing," Walter said. "He'd walked the path himself, knew the questions you'd face." He smiled. "Wonder what envelope 3 says about loss." I thought about that, about what loss might be coming. But I also thought about what Winters had written in his journal, that every loss makes room for a gain, that we trade comforts for experiences, possessions for meaning, security for life. "I guess we'll find out when we need to," I said. That evening, I sat on the cabin steps with Emma, watching the sun set over the wheat fields. They were golden now, heavy with grain, ready for harvest, beautiful and temporary. Soon we'd cut them down, thresh them into grain, reduce all that beauty to something useful. It seemed like a metaphor for everything. Transformation required destruction. Harvest required loss. Nothing stayed the same. Nothing lasted forever. All you could do was tend what was in front of you and trust the cycle would continue. "Dad," Emma said, "can I ask you something?" "Anything. Do you think you would have come here if you hadn't lost your job? If you hadn't hit bottom?" I thought about that honestly. "No," I admitted. "I would have kept running, kept chasing the next promotion, the next sale, the next thing I thought would make me matter." "So maybe losing your job was the best thing that happened to you." "Maybe it was. Or maybe it just made space for the best thing. For this. For being here with you. For learning what actually matters." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "I'm glad you're here, Dad." "Me too, baby girl." She didn't correct me this time. Just let me call her that. Just let me be her father, however imperfectly, however late. The wheat fields whispered in the evening breeze, and somewhere in that sound I heard an echo of Samuel Winters' voice, a man I'd never met but who understood me better than I'd understood myself. "Say yes," he'd written. "Say yes despite your fear." I had said yes, and it had led me here, to this moment, this place, this second chance. The first harvest of my new life was days away, and I was ready. As ready as anyone ever is for the work of transformation, for the sacred labor of becoming someone new. The sun touched the horizon, painting everything gold. And I thought about envelope 3, about loss, about what I might still have to surrender. But whatever came next, I would not face it alone. That was the gift. Not certainty, not comfort, but presence, community, love that showed up in practical ways. Samuel Winters had known, had understood, had left a map for people like me who'd lost their way. And I was following it home. The wheat was ready on a Tuesday in late August when the air hung thick with humidity and the sky promised storms that wouldn't come. Walter walked the fields at dawn, pulling random stalks, rubbing the kernels between his calloused fingers, bringing them to his mouth to test the moisture content the way farmers had done for 1,000 years. "Tomorrow," he said, when he came back to the house where Emma and I were drinking coffee on the porch. "We start tomorrow. Weather's holding. Wheat's at 14% moisture. If we wait any longer, we risk it getting too dry and shattering in the header." I felt my stomach tighten. 6 weeks of preparation had led to this moment. All the maintenance, all the practice runs, all the learning. Now it was real. Now we'd find out if I could actually do what I'd been trained to do. "You ready?" Walter asked, reading my face. "No," I said honestly, "but I'll do it anyway. That's the only kind of ready that matters." We spent that day doing final checks. Every belt, every bearing, every hydraulic line on the combine. We topped off fuel tanks, greased fittings one more time, made sure the grain trucks were positioned and ready. Walter moved through the task with the calm of long experience, but I could see tension in his shoulders, the way he checked and rechecked things he'd already verified. This matters to you, I said as we worked. More than just a crop. He stopped, looked out over the fields. Last crop I'll ever plant, he said quietly. I'm 76 years old, Daniel. My body's telling me it's time to stop. After this harvest, I'm selling the equipment, leasing the land out to neighbors. This farm has been in my family for 4 generations. After this, it'll just be dirt someone else works. The weight of that statement settled between us. I thought about legacy, about what we leave behind, about the ending of things that had mattered. I'm sorry, I said. Don't be. Everything ends. The question is whether you end it right. Whether the last thing you do honors everything that came before. He put his hand on the combine's sun-warmed metal. This machine and I are going to bring in one more harvest together. Going to do it right. That's enough. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in the cabin listening to the night sounds, thinking about the next day, about all the ways I could fail. The combine was a complicated machine. One wrong adjustment, and I could lose grain, clog the system, damage equipment worth more than I could afford to replace. Walter was counting on me, trusting me with something precious. Around midnight, I gave up on sleep and walked out to the fields. The moon was 3/4 full, bright enough to cast shadows. The wheat glowed silver in that light, an ocean of grain ready to be harvested. I walked between the rows, running my hands over the seed heads, feeling their weight, their readiness. Couldn't sleep either? I turned. Sarah was walking toward me across the field, wearing jeans and a sweatshirt, her hair loose around her shoulders. I'd never seen it down before. It made her look younger, more vulnerable. Big day tomorrow, I said. Mind's racing. She came to stand beside me. I had a call tonight. Emergency. Horse with colic up at the Peterson farm. Got it stabilized, but I'm too wired to sleep. We stood together in the moonlit field, not touching, just sharing the space and the silence. Are you scared? She asked. Terrified. What if I mess it up? What if I cost Walter his last harvest? Then you'll have messed it up, and you'll fix what can be fixed, and you'll learn from what can't be. Sarah looked at me. Daniel, you're going to make mistakes tomorrow. Guaranteed. First time running a combine by yourself, something will go wrong. The question isn't whether you'll be perfect. It's whether you'll keep going when you're not. That's not very comforting, she smiled. I'm a vet. I deal in reality, not comfort. But here's the reality. Walter trusts you. That man doesn't trust easily. He sees something in you worth believing in. I wish I could see it. Give it time. She reached out and took my hand, laced her fingers through mine. This is what courage looks like, you know? Standing in a field at midnight, scared out of your mind, but planning to show up anyway come morning. We stood like that for a long time, holding hands in the wheat field under the moon. 2 broken people learning to be whole again. When we finally walked back toward the buildings, she kissed me on the cheek. Good luck tomorrow, she said. I'll be thinking about you. I watched her drive away, then went back to the cabin and somehow fell asleep with her words echoing in my mind. Walter trusts you. Show up anyway. Dawn came too quickly and too slowly. Walter was already up when I emerged from the cabin, the combine's engine rumbling to life, diesel smoke rising in the cool morning air. The smell of it, raw and powerful, made everything real. You take the south field first, Walter said, showing me the map we'd marked up. 20 acres. Straight runs, no obstacles. Get your feel for the machine. I'll be in the truck monitoring yield, watching for problems. Radio me if anything feels wrong. What if I don't know what wrong feels like? You'll know. Machine will tell you. Listen to her. I climbed up into the combine's cab, settled into the seat that Walter had occupied for 30 years, and took a breath. The control panel sprawled before me, gauges and switches and monitors. I'd practiced this. I knew what everything did, in theory. I engaged the header, lowered it to cutting height, and started forward. The first pass was transcendent. The header's reel swept the wheat stalks backward into the cutting blades. The machine vibrated with the rhythm of threshing, separating grain from chaff in the belly of the beast. Behind me, golden straw shot out in a steady stream, laying down in neat windrows. The grain tank began to fill. I was harvesting, actually harvesting, taking a living crop and transforming it into food. The weight of that hit me harder than I expected. This mattered. This fed people. This was real in a way nothing in my previous career had ever been real. The first hour went perfectly. I settled into the rhythm, learned to read the wheat's density, adjusted my speed to match. The radio crackled occasionally with Walter's voice offering small corrections, encouragement. The grain tank filled, and I practiced the unloading sequence, extending the auger and filling the truck Walter had positioned alongside. Then 2 hours in, everything went wrong. I was halfway through a pass when the combine's engine bogged down. The normal steady roar dropped to a laboring groan. I eased off the throttle, but the sound didn't improve. Then came a noise like metal tearing. The whole machine shuddered and stopped dead. "Walter," I said into the radio, trying to keep panic out of my voice. "I've got a problem." "What kind of problem?" "Engine's bogged down. Something's jammed." I shut it down. "Good. Stay there. I'm coming." The next hour was a nightmare of diagnosis and repair. Something had wrapped around the drive shaft. A piece of baling wire, old and forgotten in the field, had caught in the mechanism and tangled everything into a knot of metal and wheat. We had to disassemble half the drive system to clear it. My hands shook as I worked. This was my fault. I should have been more careful, should have seen it, should have done something different. "This happens," Walter said, reading my face. "Not your fault. Random bad luck. We fix it and keep going. But we're losing time, losing daylight. Then we work faster. Come on." We got the combine running again by early afternoon, but the delay had cost us. We were hours behind schedule, and the weather, which had been holding steady, started to shift. Clouds built on the western horizon, dark ones, the kind that carried rain. "We need to push through," Walter said. "Work until dark, maybe into the night if we have to. Can't let this wheat get rained on." So we pushed. I ran the combine until my eyes burned and my back screamed and my hands cramped on the controls. Walter drove the grain trucks in relay, hauling load after load to the storage bins, running on pure determination and 60 years of experience. Emma brought us food at sunset, sandwiches we ate standing up, barely tasting them. She looked worried. "Dad, you've been at this for 12 hours. You need to rest." "Can't," I said. "Storm's coming. We have to finish the south field tonight." "You're exhausted. What if you make a mistake?" "Then I make a mistake, but I keep going." She wanted to argue. I could see it in her face, but she just nodded and drove back to the farmhouse, leaving us to the work. By 10 that night, we'd finished the south field, 20 acres harvested, the grain safely stored. But we'd learned something troubling in the process. The combine was running rough. Something in the threshing system wasn't right. We were losing grain, precious kernels passing through unthreshed and ending up in the straw. "We'll have to tear into it tomorrow," Walter said, exhaustion making his voice thin. "Can't keep losing yield like that. But we did good today, Daniel. Real good. Despite the breakdown, despite everything, we got it done." I nodded, too tired to speak. I drove back to the cabin in Walter's truck, stumbled inside, and collapsed onto the bed fully clothed. I woke 4 hours later to my phone ringing. My mother's number. I answered it with dread already settling into my stomach. "Danny," she said, and her voice was wrong, shaking. "You need to come. It's your father. He's had another stroke. A bad one. They don't think he has much time." The world tilted. "I'm coming. I'm leaving right now." I threw clothes in a bag, left a note for Walter, and drove through the darkness toward the nursing home 2 hours away. The roads were empty at 3 in the morning, just me and my headlights and the terrible knowledge that I might be too late. I made it in an hour and 45 minutes, breaking every speed limit. My mother was waiting in the lobby, small and fragile in a way I'd never seen her. She fell into my arms. "He's still here," she said. "Still fighting. He's been asking for you." The nursing home had moved him to their hospice wing, a small room with soft lighting and a window that looked out on nothing. Frank Morrison lay in the bed, and he was barely recognizable. The stroke had taken the left side of his face, left him unable to speak clearly, but his eyes were alert. When I walked in, they found me immediately. "Dad," I said, pulling a chair close to the bed, "I'm here." His right hand moved weakly. I took it. His grip was so faint I could barely feel it. "Son," he managed. The word was slurred but understandable. "Proud. So proud." "Save your strength," I said, tears already falling. "You're going to be okay." But we both knew that was a lie. The monitor showed his vitals, and they told the story his body couldn't. This was the end. My mother stood by the window, giving us space. The nurse had said it could be hours or it could be minutes. There was no way to know. Walter, my father said with great effort. Good man. Yes, he's teaching me everything. You, my father struggled with the words. You learning? I am. I'm learning what matters, Dad. I'm learning to be present, to not run, to value the right things. Something that might have been a smile crossed half his face. Finally, I sat with him as the sky outside began to lighten. My mother came and went, bringing coffee neither of us drank. The nurse checked on him every 30 minutes, adjusting medications, making him comfortable. But mostly it was just him and me, father and son, finally in the same room without all the years of distance between us. Around 7 in the morning, he grew more agitated. His good hand gripped mine harder. Need, he said. Need to tell. What, Dad? What do you need to tell me? With tremendous effort, fighting the stroke's paralysis, he got the words out. The business. With Walt, I stole $5,000 to pay for you when you were born sick. I let him think I failed him. Couldn't tell truth. Too ashamed. The confession hung in the air. I thought about Walter's story, about the partnership that failed, about 40 years of silence born from pride and hurt. Walt knows, I said. I told him. He forgives you, Dad. He sent me to you because he wanted you to know he forgives you. My father's eyes filled with tears. Really? Really? And I forgive you too. For all of it. For pushing me away. For the distance. For everything. I forgive you and I love you. The tension went out of his body. The hand gripping mine relaxed. Love you, he whispered. Be better than me. I already am, I said, because you taught me what not to do, and now you're teaching me how to make it right. Thank you, Dad, for all of it. He closed his eyes. For a moment, I thought he'd slipped away. But then he opened them again, focused on me with sudden clarity. Envelope, he said. 3, loss, read it. How do you know about that? Walt told me. When you found box, he called. We talk now, every week. Brothers again. His breathing was labored now. Read envelope 3, teaches how to lose without losing yourself. I will, Dad, I promise. He smiled, both sides of his face this time, just for a second. Then he closed his eyes and his breathing changed, became shallow and irregular. Mom, I called softly. She came to the bedside. We stood together, holding his hands, as Frank Morrison took his last breaths. He went peacefully, no struggle, just a gradual fading like a light being turned down slowly until it was gone. The nurse came in, checked for a pulse, and nodded. I'm so sorry for your loss. My mother sobbed once, deep and wrenching, then pulled herself together with visible effort. He's at peace now, she said. Finally at peace. I called Walter from the parking lot an hour later, after we'd signed papers and made arrangements with the funeral home. He answered on the first ring. Your father? He asked without preamble. He's gone, this morning. There was a long silence. Then Walter's voice, thick with grief. I'm sorry, Daniel. Frank was the best friend I ever had. I wasted 40 years being angry at him when I should have been grateful for the years we had. He forgave you, I said. At the end, he wanted you to know that. I forgave him too. We talked every week since you came here. Made our peace, but I still wish I'd had more time. Don't we all? Another pause. Daniel, take the time you need. The harvest can wait. I thought about that. About my father's last words. About envelope 3 and what it might say about loss. About the wheat waiting in the fields and the storm that was still coming. No, I said, Dad's last words to me were about the harvest. About not losing myself in the loss. I need to finish this, Walter. For him. For me. I'll be back tomorrow after we make the funeral arrangements. Are you sure? I'm sure. This is what he'd want. For me to see something through. To not run when things get hard. That night, I sat in my childhood bedroom in my mother's small apartment, the room she'd kept exactly as I'd left it 30 years ago. I pulled out envelope 3, the one about loss, and I opened it with shaking hands. To the person who has discovered this box, I read, by now you have faced loss. Perhaps someone you love has died. Perhaps you have lost something precious. Perhaps the loss is still so fresh, it feels like you cannot breathe around it. I know this feeling. I know it intimately. I paused, wiping my eyes. In 1955, my father died. We had not spoken in 25 years. I had written him letters every year, trying to reconcile, and he had returned them unopened. I thought I had made peace with his absence from my life, but when he died, the grief was overwhelming. Not grief for the father I'd lost, grief for the father I'd never had. for the reconciliation that would never happen, for the words unspoken and the love unexpressed. I wanted to stop reading. It was too much, too raw, too close to what I was feeling. But I forced myself to continue. A friend told me something that changed everything. He said, the people we lose never really leave us. They live on in the choices we make, the lessons we learn from them, the ways we choose to honor or defy their example. Your father is not gone. He is part of every decision you make from this moment forward. The question is what part of him you will carry with you. I thought about my father, about his strength and his flaws, his pride and his capacity for love, about the way he'd push me away because he thought I deserved better, and the way he'd welcome me back when I finally understood what better really meant. I kept reading. So here is what I learned about loss. You do not overcome it. You do not move past it. You integrate it. You make space for the grief while also making space for joy. You carry the weight while also carrying on. And you honor what was lost by becoming more fully who you are meant to be. Loss breaks us open. The question is what we allow to grow in that broken place. There was more, but I couldn't read it through my tears. I folded the letter carefully and put it back in the envelope. Then I lay on my childhood bed and cried for my father, for the years we'd lost, for the peace we'd found too late, and for the gift he'd given me in his final words. Be better than me. I would try. God knows I would try. The funeral was 3 days later, a small service at the church my mother attended, maybe 30 people. Emma came, 7 months pregnant now and showing it. Walter came leaning on a cane I'd never seen him use before, looking older than I'd ever seen him look. Sarah came sitting in the back, her presence a comfort I hadn't known I needed. I spoke at the service, talked about my father's strength, his work ethic, his love for his family even when he couldn't express it. I talked about the reconciliation we'd found at the end, about forgiveness and second chances. And I talked about the farm, about how my father had sent me to Walter, had orchestrated a reunion he couldn't be part of himself, had given me the gift of work that mattered and a chance to become someone better. He taught me, I said, looking at the small crowd, that it's never too late to change, never too late to say you're sorry, never too late to show up for the people you love. His last gift to me was showing me what that looks like, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to honor that gift. After the service, Walter pulled me aside. Your father would be proud of that eulogy. I hope so. He was. Walter's eyes were wet. We talked about you, in those phone calls. He said you'd found something he never could. Purpose, presence. He died happy, Daniel. Died knowing you were going to be okay. The words broke something loose in my chest. I hugged Walter, this old man who'd given me a chance, who'd believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. Thank you, I said, for everything. Thank you for coming back, he replied. For not running. Your father sent you to me because he knew what I could teach you, but you've taught me something too, that it's never too late for second chances, never too late to make something right. Emma found me in the parking lot after everyone had left. She was crying, hormones and grief making everything more intense. I never got to say goodbye to Grandpa, she said. Never got to tell him I forgave him for not being there. You don't have to, I said. He knew. People always know, even when we don't say it out loud. How? Because love is louder than silence. And you loved him. That got through. She leaned against me and I held her, my pregnant daughter, and thought about the life she was carrying. My grandchild, my father's great-grandchild, the legacy continuing despite loss because of it. We drove back to the farm the next morning. The wheat fields waited, patient and indifferent to human grief. The storm had held off, but new clouds were building. We had maybe 3 more days of good weather. After that, rain would come, and the unharvested wheat would be damaged, possibly ruined. Walter was waiting on the porch. The combine's fixed, he said. Neighbor helped me tear into the threshing system. Found the problem. We're ready to go if you are. I'm ready, and I was, ready to work, ready to finish what we'd started, ready to honor my father by not letting grief stop me from showing up. We harvested for 3 straight days, 16-hour shifts, me on the combine, Walter on the grain trucks, both of us pushing through exhaustion in the September heat. Emma brought us food and water, refused to let us skip meals. Sarah stopped by each evening to check on us, to make sure we were holding up. The work was meditation, the rhythm of the machine, the endless rows of wheat falling before the header, the grain tank filling and emptying in cycles. My mind wandered to my father, to memories good and bad, to all the things I wished I'd said, and the few things I had managed to say that mattered. And I found that Winters was right. The loss didn't diminish, but I was making space for it, carrying the grief while also carrying on. The wheat didn't care that I was sad. It needed to be harvested. The work didn't care about my pain. It needed to be done. And there was comfort in that, in the knowledge that life continued, that growth and harvest and the turning of seasons would go on regardless of individual sorrow. On the third night, we finished. The last pass through the last field as the sun touched the western horizon. I shut down the combine and climbed down, legs shaking from exhaustion. Walter walked toward me across the stubble field, moving slowly, and I could see in his face what this meant to him. "We did it," he said. "Last harvest." And we brought it home. We stood together looking at the fields, bare now except for the windrows of straw. 200 acres of wheat transformed into grain. Food for thousands of people. Work that mattered. "Your father would be proud," Walter said. "You didn't quit. Didn't let grief stop you." "That's strength, Daniel. Real strength." "I learned it from him," I said. "And from you." That night, the rain finally came. Heavy sheets of it, drumming on the cabin roof, soaking the harvested fields. We'd finished with maybe 6 hours to spare. 6 hours between success and disaster. I thought about timing, about how close we always are to losing everything, about how the line between triumph and tragedy is often nothing more than showing up, working through pain, refusing to quit. Emma knocked on the cabin door around midnight. I opened it to find her standing in the rain, her hand on her belly, her face scared. "Dad," she said, "something's wrong. I'm having contractions. It's too early." My heart stopped. How early? 6 months. She's not supposed to come for 3 more months. I grabbed my keys, helped Emma to the truck, and drove through the storm toward the hospital in Hannibal. Sarah met us there, called by Emma during the drive. The doctors examined Emma, hooked her to monitors, their faces serious. "We're going to try to stop the labor," the OB said. "Give the baby more time to develop, but you need to prepare yourself. If we can't stop it, this baby is coming tonight." The next 6 hours were the longest of my life. Emma in a hospital bed, monitors beeping, medications dripping through IVs, trying to stop what her body had started. I sat beside her holding her hand, terrified in a way I'd never been terrified before. "I can't lose her," Emma said, tears streaming down her face. "Dad, I can't lose my baby." "You won't," I said, wishing I could make it true. "You're strong. She's strong. You're both fighters." "But what if I'm not strong enough? Then we'll find a way to be strong enough together." "I'm here, Emma. I'm not going anywhere." Sarah stood by the window, ready to help if needed. Walter had come too, despite the late hour, sitting in the waiting room because Emma's room was too small for everyone. And my mother arrived at dawn, having driven through the storm from St. Louis, refusing to miss this. By noon, the medications had worked. The contractions stopped. The baby's heartbeat remained strong and steady. Emma would have to stay on bed rest for the remainder of her pregnancy, but the immediate crisis had passed. "She's going to be okay," the doctor said. "Both of them. You got lucky." But I knew it wasn't luck. It was presence. People showing up, refusing to let Emma face this alone. Community and love in practical action. That's what Winters had been trying to tell me all along. That's what the envelopes were teaching. That life is fragile and hard and full of loss. But we face it together. We show up for each other. We don't run. 2 weeks later, Walter and I sat on his porch at sunset. The harvest was sold, the money divided according to our agreement. My 40% was more than I'd made in any single year of my sales career. But more than that, I'd earned it, with my hands and my back and my presence. "I've been thinking," Walter said, "about what comes next. Selling the farm? Maybe. Or maybe there's another option." He looked at me carefully. "What if you bought it? I'd sell it to you below market value. You could pay me over time, keep working it, make it yours." The offer hung in the air between us. A farm, a life, a legacy. Everything I'd never known I wanted. "I don't know if I can do this long term," I said honestly. "I'm still learning, still figuring out who I am." "That's what life is," Walter said, "figuring it out as you go. But I see something in you, Daniel. I see someone who's found his footing, someone who shows up, someone who doesn't quit when things get hard. That's what a farmer is. That's what this land needs." I thought about my father, about what he'd want me to do, about the life I'd left behind, and the life I was building. Let me think about it, I said. It's a big decision. Take your time, but not too much time. I'm not getting any younger. That night I opened envelope 4, the one about forgiveness. I needed to know what Winters had to say about that, about how to forgive yourself for the years you've wasted, the people you have hurt, the man you used to be. His words were simple and profound. Forgiveness is not forgetting, it is releasing. Releasing the grip the past has on your future. Releasing the story you tell yourself about who you are based on who you were. Releasing the belief that you are beyond redemption. Everyone deserves forgiveness, especially yourself, especially when you have done the work to change. I read the letter 3 times. Then I called Emma. How are you feeling? I asked. Better. Bored. Bed rest is torture. But the baby's good. Strong heartbeat. She's a fighter like her mom. Like her grandfather too, I said. Emma, I need to ask you something. Walter offered to sell me the farm. I could stay here. Make a life here. But that would mean you and the baby would be here too, if you wanted, in the middle of nowhere, away from your career, your friends, everything you built in Chicago. There was a long pause, then Emma's voice, soft but certain. Dad, I don't want to go back to Chicago. I want to be here, where people show up for each other, where family means something, where my daughter can grow up knowing her grandfather. If you buy this farm, we stay. Both of us. Something in my chest unclenched. Okay then, okay. I'm proud of you, Dad. She paused. Grandpa Frank would be proud of you too. I think he is, I said. Wherever he is, I think he's watching and he's proud. After we hung up, I walked out to the wheat fields under the stars. The stubble crunched under my feet. The air smelled like rain and earth and the particular sweetness of harvest completed. I thought about Samuel Winters, about his journey from wealth to poverty to purpose, about the envelopes he'd left behind, the map he'd drawn for people like me who'd lost their way. 4 envelopes opened, 4 lessons learned, 1 more remained. Envelope 5, when you find your purpose. I wasn't there yet, but I was close, so close I could feel it. The land stretched out around me, patient and eternal, waiting to see what I would become, what I would build, what I would leave behind. I was ready to find out. Winter came to Meadowbrook Farm with a gentleness that surprised me. The fields lay fallow under a light dusting of snow, resting after the harvest, gathering strength for the next planting season. The work didn't stop, it just changed shape. Repairing equipment, maintaining buildings, planning for spring, learning the rhythm of a farmer's off-season. Emma grew larger weeks by week, her body transforming as the baby inside her grew. She was 5 months along now, past the dangerous early weeks, her pregnancy healthy and progressing well. She'd transformed the small cabin into a nursery of sorts, painting one wall a soft yellow, hanging curtains she'd sewn herself from fabric my mother had sent. She was nesting, Walter called it, preparing the way mothers have prepared since the beginning of time. I bought the farm in October, signed the papers in Walter's kitchen with Sarah and Emma as witnesses, using the money from the harvest as down payment and structuring the rest as payments I'd make to Walter over the next 10 years. It was the biggest decision of my life, committing to land and legacy in a future I was still learning to imagine. You won't regret this, Walter said as we shook hands. This land has a way of teaching you what you need to know. I already don't regret it, I said, and I meant it. Walter moved into a small house in Hannibal proper, close to the senior center where he could play cards with other retired farmers and tell stories about the old days. But he came out to the farm twice a week, checking on things, offering advice, making sure I wasn't making any catastrophic mistakes. You're doing good, he'd say, examining my work with a critical eye. Better than I expected. You've got the instinct for this. Coming from Walter, that was high praise. Sarah and I continued our careful dance towards something neither of us was quite ready to name. She'd come for dinner once a week, helping Emma cook since standing for long periods was getting difficult for my daughter. We'd sit on the porch afterward, talking about our days, our losses, our slow healing. Sometimes we held hands. Sometimes we just sat in comfortable silence. One evening in November, she asked the question I'd been waiting for. What happens after the baby comes, Daniel? What happens with us? I don't know, I admitted. I care about you, more than I've cared about anyone in a long time, but I'm also scared of failing again, of hurting someone else I love. We're both scared, she said. That's not a reason not to try. It's just a reason to be careful, to be intentional, to not repeat old mistakes. What if we do anyway? What if broken people just break each other worse? She smiled, sad and wise. Then we'll put the pieces back together again. That's what people do, Daniel. We break and we heal and we break again. The question is whether we do it alone or together. Together sounds better, I said. It does, doesn't it? We kissed that night for the first time, gentle and uncertain and full of hope. Two middle-aged people learning to love again after loss. It wasn't the passionate romance of youth. It was something better. More real, more earned. My mother visited twice, bringing boxes of my father's things she thought I might want. His tools, his military medals, a photo album from when I was young, pictures I'd never seen of him holding me as a baby, looking at me with an expression of pure wonder. He loved you so much, my mother said, turning pages. He just didn't know how to show it. And by the time he learned, you were gone, built your own life. He thought he'd lost his chance. But we found it again, I said. At the end, we made peace. She touched my face, her hand soft and worn. You gave him a gift, Danny. You let him die knowing you forgave him, knowing you understood. Not many people get that. I called Marcus, my son in Seattle, for the first time in 4 years. The conversation was stilted, awkward, 20 years of distance between us. He was cold at first, defensive. But when I told him about the farm, about Emma and the baby, about Grandpa Frank dying and the changes in my life, something in his voice softened. Are you really different, Dad, or is this just another phase? I'm different, I said, or at least I'm trying to be. I can't undo the past, Marcus. Can't give you back the father I should have been. But I can be different going forward, if you'll let me. There was a long silence. Then Emma says the baby's due in January. January 12th. You have a niece coming. She's going to need an uncle. Another pause. I'll think about coming out, meeting her, meeting you, the new you. That's all I'm asking for. A chance. We'll see, Dad. We'll see. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was a start, a small crack in a wall I'd spent 20 years building. Small cracks were enough. They let the light in. December brought harder cold and the kind of solitude that forces you to face yourself. The work slowed. The daylight hours shortened. I spent long evenings alone in the farmhouse, reading Samuel Winter's journal by lamplight, learning about a man who'd walked a similar path of loss and discovery 50 years before. One entry from December 1968 spoke to me with particular force. Today marks 3 years since I buried my old life and embraced this new one. 3 years of poverty and purpose. 3 years of learning that meaning comes not from what you have, but from what you give. I thought I would miss my former wealth, the comfort, the status, but I find I miss nothing. This life, strange and difficult as it is, feels more real than anything I knew before. I am more myself as a poor preacher than I ever was as a rich man's son. I thought about my own journey. 8 months since I'd lost my job. 8 months since I'd arrived at this farm as a desperate man with nothing left to lose. And now I had everything that mattered. Land, purpose, family, love. The question that haunted me was whether I deserved it. Whether someone who'd wasted so many years, hurt so many people, failed so spectacularly at the things that mattered, could really claim redemption. Envelope 5 sat on the kitchen table waiting. When you find your purpose, it said on the outside. But I was afraid to open it. Afraid it would tell me I hadn't actually found it yet. That I was fooling myself. That real purpose required something more than I was capable of giving. Christmas came. Emma and I decorated the farmhouse, hanging lights and putting up a small tree. She was 8 months pregnant now, her belly full and round, moving carefully but still insisting on helping. Sarah joined us for dinner, bringing wine and homemade cookies. Walter came too, bringing stories and laughter and the gift of his presence. We sat around the table, this makeshift family built from broken pieces, and I felt something I hadn't felt in decades. Belonging, the sense that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. After dinner, Emma asked me to feel the baby kicking. I put my hand on her belly and felt that tiny life moving, fighting, preparing to enter the world. My grandchild, legacy in its purest form. She's strong, Emma said, just like Grandpa Frank. Just like her mother, I said. And her grandfather, Sarah added, looking at me with warmth. Don't sell yourself short, Daniel. You're stronger than you think. That night, after everyone had gone home or to bed, I sat alone with envelope 5. The last one, The final lesson from a man I'd never met but who understood me better than I understood myself. I opened it with shaking hands. To the person who has discovered this box, I read, if you are reading this, you have walked through doubt and loss and the hard work of forgiveness. You have chosen to stay when running would have been easier. You have shown up for people who needed you. You have done the work. Now comes the question you have been asking yourself. Have I found my purpose? Do I deserve this life I am building? Am I enough? My breath caught. Winters had known, had predicted not just the circumstances, but the exact question that would be haunting me. I continued reading. Here is what I learned about purpose after 40 years of searching for it. Purpose is not what you do. It is who you become for others. It is not a destination you arrive at. It is a direction you face. It is not something you find once and possess forever. It is something you choose every single day with every action. I paused, letting the words sink in. I was not a good man when I started this journey. I was prideful, selfish, concerned only with my own comfort and status. The crash of 1929 did not make me good. It simply stripped away the circumstances that allowed me to avoid facing who I really was. And in that stripping away, I was given a choice. I could become bitter and hard, or I could become something better. I chose better. Not perfectly, not without failures and setbacks and moments of profound doubt, but I chose it. Every day, with every person I served, with every moment I chose presence over pride. And that is what I want you to understand. You are not asking the wrong question when you wonder if you deserve this life. You are asking it too late. You already chose to deserve it when you said yes to the work. When you stayed despite your fear. When you showed up for the people who needed you. When you let yourself be transformed by the labor of farming, by the rhythm of seasons, by the sacred act of nurturing growth. Tears were streaming down my face now, but I kept reading. Your purpose is not to be a farmer. It is to be a person who shows up, who does not run, who loves imperfectly but persistently, who builds something that will last beyond your lifetime. The farm is just the vehicle. The wheat is just the medium. The real harvest is who you become in the process of bringing it in. So here is my final message to you. You have found your purpose, not because you are perfect, not because you have arrived at some final destination, but because you are facing the right direction, because you are doing the work, because you are becoming the person you were always meant to be. There was more, but I had to stop, had to put the letter down and let the sobs come. Deep, wrenching relief. Permission I hadn't known I needed. Confirmation that the path I'd chosen, as uncertain and difficult as it sometimes felt, was the right one. When I could see again through my tears, I finished reading. One more thing. Under the oak tree by the creek, 3 feet down, I have buried something for the next generation. For your children or grandchildren. Let them find it when they are ready. Let them learn, as you have learned, that we are all part of a chain, that what we plant matters, that the harvest continues long after we are gone. Be well, be present, be the answer to someone's prayer. You already are, even if you cannot see it yet. Samuel Winters, April 1975. I sat in the quiet farmhouse, holding that letter, feeling the weight of 50 years of wisdom, of a dead man's faith that someone would need these words exactly when I needed them. The next morning, I told Emma about the letter, about the final message under the oak tree. She was 8.5 months pregnant now, moving slowly but determined to be part of this. We have to find it, she said, before the baby comes. It feels important. We walked to the creek together, Emma leaning on my arm, taking her time. The oak tree was massive, probably 200 years old, its bare branches reaching toward the winter sky. We'd brought shovels, and I started digging where the letter had indicated, 3 feet down. The ground was cold, but not frozen. I dug carefully, Emma watching from a fallen log where she could rest. After 40 minutes, I hit something solid, not metal this time, wood. It was a wooden box, smaller than the copper one, cedar from the smell of it, naturally resistant to rot. I lifted it out and brought it to Emma. Together we opened it. Inside was a set of old hand tools, a trowel, a small spade, pruning shears, all made of copper and brass, engraved with the initials SW and the date 1920. There were seeds too, stored in glass jars with wax seals, wheat, corn, beans, heirloom varieties carefully preserved, and a note. To the child of the one who found envelope 5. These tools built this farm from nothing in 1930 when I first came to this land. These seeds are heirlooms, passed down through generations. Plant them, save the seeds, pass them to your children. Farming is not just a job, it is a covenant with the future. Tell your story. Let them know we are not self-made. We are the harvest of seeds planted by those who came before. Samuel Winters. Emma was crying, her hand on her belly. He knew, she whispered. Somehow he knew there would be a child, that the story would continue. Or he hoped, I said, and his hope became prophecy. We brought the box back to the farmhouse. Emma placed it on the mantel, next to the copper box that had started everything. 2 gifts across time, 2 messages from a man who understood that legacy is not what you leave behind, but what you build into the people who come after you. That night, Emma went into labor. It started with contractions around 8, gentle at first, then building in intensity. We called Sarah, who met us at the hospital. We called my mother, who drove through the night from St. Louis. We called Walter, who showed up at midnight with coffee and donuts and the calm presence of someone who'd seen a lot of life and knew that most things work out. Marcus called at 2 in the morning, having gotten the message I'd left. How is she? She's fighting, I said. Strong contractions. She's in pain, but the doctors say everything looks good. Tell her I'm thinking about her. Tell her I love her. I will. Are you coming? There was a pause, then, Yeah, I'm coming. I'll catch a flight tomorrow. I want to meet my niece. And Dad, I want to meet you too. The real you. I'll be here, I said. I'm not going anywhere. Emma labored through the night. I stayed by her side, holding her hand, breathing with her through contractions, being present in the only way I knew how. Sarah stayed too, offering medical insight, moral support, the gift of her steady presence. Dawn was breaking when the baby finally came. A tiny, perfect girl with dark hair and lungs that announced her arrival to the entire maternity ward. Emma held her, tears streaming down her face, looking at her daughter with wonder. Rose, she said. Her name is Rose. After my mother, I said, remembering. Judith Rose. After Grandma, Emma confirmed. And after the hope that grows even in hard soil, they let me hold her. This tiny life, barely 7 pounds, who would never know her great-grandfather Frank, but would know the man he'd helped me become. I looked at her wrinkled face, her tiny fingers, and I felt something shift in my chest. Expansion, the sense that my heart was big enough for this, for all of it, for the love and terror and responsibility of being someone this child could count on. I will be here, I whispered to her, for every moment, every milestone. I won't miss it. I won't run. I promise. Marcus arrived the next afternoon, tall and guarded, his mother Linda's eyes uncertain how to navigate this reunion. But when he held Rose, when he looked at his sister and saw her exhausted joy, something in him softened. She's perfect, he said. You were this small once, I told him. I held you like this. And I was terrified, certain I would mess it up, and I did mess it up. But I'm trying to be better now. He looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw the question in his eyes. The one I'd been asking myself. Can people really change? I don't know if we can fix what's broken between us, I said. 20 years of absence is a lot to overcome. But I'd like to try. I'd like to get to know you, the man you've become. I'd like to tell you about the man I'm trying to be. Marcus nodded slowly. Okay, let's try. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. But it was possibility. Impossibility was enough to start with. We brought Emma and Rose home 3 days later. The farmhouse had been transformed by my mother and Sarah, decorated with balloons and flowers, the nursery set up with everything a new baby needed. Walter was there, holding court on the porch, already planning to teach Rose about farming when she was old enough to walk. This is what it's all about, he said, looking at the baby. Continuity, legacy, making sure the next generation knows where they came from and what matters. Emma settled into motherhood with the same fierce determination she brought to everything. She was exhausted and overwhelmed and utterly in love with her daughter. I helped however I could, learning to change diapers and warm bottles and rock a crying infant at 3 in the morning. In those quiet pre-dawn hours, holding Rose while Emma slept, I thought about Samuel Winters, about the journey he'd mapped out in those 5 envelopes, about how he'd understood that transformation wasn't a destination, but a direction, a daily choice to show up, to serve, to be present. Sarah and I got married in the spring, a simple ceremony in the wheat fields with Emma and Rose and Walter and my mother and Marcus as witnesses. No big production, just 2 people making a promise to face whatever came next together. I do, we said to each other, and we meant it. We planted the heirloom seeds that spring, the wheat from winter's collection, varieties that hadn't been grown commercially in decades. They grew strong and true, and by harvest time, we had a crop that drew attention from agricultural researchers studying heritage grains. This is important, they told us. These varieties have genetics we've lost in modern farming. They're disease-resistant, climate-adaptive. You're preserving something precious. We're just planting what was given to us, I said, passing it on. But that was the point, I realized. We were all just passing things on. Knowledge, values, seeds literal and metaphorical. The question wasn't whether we'd plant perfectly, it was whether we'd plant at all. Rose grew, learned to roll over, to sit up, to crawl. Emma documented everything, sending photos to my mother, to Marcus, who visited twice more that year. The farm thrived. Sarah's veterinary practice expanded. Walter's health held steady. And I learned to be present, to show up every day, to do the work without needing it to be perfect, to accept that I was enough, not because I'd arrived at some final destination, but because I was facing the right direction. One evening in late autumn, almost exactly 2 years after I'd first arrived at Meadowbrook Farm, I sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the wheat fields gold. Emma was inside putting Rose to bed. Sarah was reading on the porch swing. Walter had come for dinner and was dozing in a rocking chair. This is it, I thought. This is what I was running toward my whole life without knowing it. Not success, not wealth, not status, just this. People I love. Work that matters. Presence. Sarah reached over and took my hand. What are you thinking about? Everything, I said. How different my life is now. How different I am. Do you miss it? Your old life? I thought about that honestly. Sometimes I miss the simplicity of it. The clear metrics. You make a sale or you don't. You hit your targets or you don't. Farming's more complicated, more uncertain. But nothing in my old life was real. It was all performance playing a role. This is real, hard and messy and uncertain, but real. Marcus called that night. Dad, he said, and the words still sounded strange from him, unpracticed. I've been thinking about taking some time off, coming out to the farm for a few weeks, learning what you do, if that's okay. More than okay, I said. When? Next month. I want to see Rose. Want to see what changed you. Want to understand. I'll be here, I said. We'll be here. After we hung up, I went to the kitchen where the 2 boxes sat on the shelf. The copper box that had held winter's first message. The wooden box with the tools and seeds for the next generation. I pulled out the journal, opened it to a random page. The entry was dated March 1974, 1 year before Winters died. I am old now and my time is short, but I find I have no regrets. I lost a fortune and gained a life. I lost status and gained purpose. I lost comfort and gained meaning. If I could go back and choose differently, I would not. This path, difficult as it was, led me to exactly who I was meant to be. I am grateful for the losses that taught me what matters. Grateful for the failures that showed me the way. Grateful for every moment of doubt and pain and uncertainty, because they all led here, to this simple life, this sacred work, this profound sense of being exactly where I belong. I closed the journal carefully. Outside, the wheat fields whispered in the evening breeze. Emma was singing to Rose upstairs, a lullaby my mother used to sing to me. Sarah was making tea in the kitchen, humming softly. Walter snored gently on the porch. I walked outside and stood in the middle of the farmyard, looking up at the stars beginning to emerge in the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, my father was watching. I chose to believe that, chose to believe he could see what I'd become, what I was building, and that he was proud. Thank you, I said to the night, to Frank, to Walter, to all the people who'd planted seeds in my life without knowing if they'd grow. Thank you for not giving up on me, for showing me the way, for teaching me that it's never too late to change. The stars offered no answer, but I didn't need one. I had everything I needed right here. Purpose not as destination, but as direction. Legacy not as achievement, but as presence. Harvest not just of wheat, but of the man I was becoming. 2 years ago, I'd been 52 years old, lost and desperate, chasing the wrong things. Now I was 54, still learning, still growing, still making mistakes, but facing the right direction, doing the work, showing up. Emma appeared in the doorway, Rose asleep in her arms. Dad, she called softly, come inside, dinner's ready. Coming, I said, and I walked toward the light of the farmhouse, toward the family I'd found and the family I'd built, toward the life I'd almost missed by running in the wrong direction for so long. The second harvest, Winters had called it, the one that mattered. Not the wheat, the transformation, the becoming. I was still in the middle of mine, still growing, still reaching toward the light. And that, I thought as I climbed the porch steps, was exactly as it should be. The harvest never really ends. It just changes form, becomes something new, becomes legacy and love, and the quiet satisfaction of work that matters, becomes home. I opened the door and stepped inside into warmth and light in the beautiful ordinary chaos of family dinner. Rose was crying, Sarah was laughing, Emma was telling a story, Walter was arguing good-naturedly about something. This was it. This was everything. And it was enough, more than enough. It was exactly what I'd been searching for my whole life, hidden in the last place I'd thought to look. Not in boardrooms or sales figures or titles on business cards, but here, in soil and sweat and seeds, in presence and purpose, in the sacred work of showing up. Samuel Winters had left a map for people like me who'd lost their way, and I'd followed it home. The wheat fields outside would sleep through winter and wake in spring. The cycle would continue. Seeds would be planted, crops would grow, harvests would come and go, and I would be here, present, grateful, becoming. One day at a time, one choice at a time, one harvest at a time. The second harvest had begun, and it would continue long after I was gone, carried forward by Emma and Rose, and whoever came after them, planting seeds I'd never see grow, reaping harvests I'd never witness. That was legacy. That was purpose. That was the answer to the question I'd been asking since the day I'd lost everything and found myself standing on Walter's porch with nothing left to lose. What do I do now? Where do I go from here? The answer had been simple all along. You stay, you show up, you do the work, you plant seeds and trust the harvest will come. You become the answer to someone else's prayer, just as others were the answer to yours. You face the right direction and you keep walking. That's all. That's everything. And standing there in my farmhouse kitchen, surrounded by the people I loved, holding a life I'd built from the rubble of the one I'd lost, I knew with absolute certainty that I'd finally found what I'd been searching for. I'd found my way home, and the harvest was good.